Yes, please. Thank you. have a comment.
Ms. Selcraig, please.
If you haven't had a chance to look at that document that Jennifer sent us, that Ms. Johnson sent us, it's a really helpful document. After trying to slug through the whole budget myself, I was very grateful, and I just think it was a really useful and helpful item, and I want to thank her for kind of bringing that forward.
This is what Ms. Selcraig is referring to as slogging through. If anybody would like a copy, sure let us know. What is that? Mr. Tashi or Mr. Starr were catching background noises. Anything going on where you are?
Not on my end.
Mr.
Alan
Tashi?
Tashi, it's quiet in Tampa.
Okay, well, we have a ghost. Fine. Thank you. Anything else, Ms. Johnston? We do have a work session, 2 hours on the 21st, right? All right. Ms. Osiander, Title 21.
Well, I'm pleased that on tonight's agenda we'll have the first real public hearing on Chapters 4, 5, and 6 of Title 21. It's going to be my intent to move to continue that public hearing. There's a number of documents that have yet to come forth from our committee that are relevant to those chapters. One of the considerations that we're talking about is breaking up those 3 chapters so that the Assembly and the public would have the opportunity to vote on Chapter 4 separately, and then 5 later and 6 later. The goal and the idea of that would be that it's a whole lot of information to delve through, and it would be then less work and difficulty to deal with it in smaller bites. The other thing that we're waiting and hoping to see soon is a report that's being prepared under contract by Sue Fison that basically is an outline or a key to unlock some of the intricacies of Title 21, and we're told that that should be available the 1st of April. The other big piece that's out there is the economic analysis report. There will be a work session on that this Friday. Additionally, the Title 21 committee will be discussing that report this Thursday. I always tell you that to come on down to the planning department for our morning Thursday meetings. This Thursday it's in City Hall. So if you're interested in the economic analysis of Title 21, please come down to City Hall this Thursday from 9:30 to 11:30. The consultant that was hired by the city to do that work will be there and available for questions at that time. And it's my understanding after that he's immediately going to be down talking to the real estate task force group that's also been analyzing this document. That's it, sir.
Thank you. The committee will the meeting be in the mayor's conference room or the assembly conference room on Thursday?
Ms. Grunstein or Mr. Nelson, do we know of a location for that?
It's actually going to be in the 5th floor conference room purchasing department.
Wow, good to know. Thank you.
And Ms. Osander is the chairman of the Title 21 committee, but I am a member of the Title 21 committee, and we have spoken, and I've answered several emails over the last week or so about this process. We brought these 4 chapters forward because they were done at Planning and Zoning with them. They had done their work and passed them on to us with their recommendations. We've been working on them at the Title 21 committee meeting. People have asked us to postpone tonight's public hearing because they don't want us to take, I believe because they don't want us to take action. As I announced at the committee meeting as chairman of the Assembly, it was never my intent to open and close the public hearing tonight. We've said this. There will be multiple public hearings on these things. It will stretch out over weeks, if not longer, and we will get through them that way. Now, the process we're doing, which Ms. Osiander just described, may make it a little easier, a little more manageable by dividing what is now one ordinance into 3 ordinances. And the result will be that we could take action on one and still keep taking public testimony or continuing to work on the other 2. As matters now stand, they're all in one ordinance, so we would have to deal with them all at one time. Nothing in those 3 chapters that are currently wrapped up in one ordinance will be changed. If we go from one ordinance to 3, Chapter 5, Chapter 6, 4, 5, and 6 will stay the same. So nobody needs to worry that we're somehow doing something like that. Ms. Osander, follow up
I
with
want
that?
to clarify that comment. The initial document that's submitted to us is what he's referring to as not changing. However, there are a number of amendments that have already been recommended from the Planning and Zoning Commission on those chapters.
Oh, yeah.
Additionally, in fact, on Chapter 4, there's an S version that comes from the Commission's work. Additionally, our committee has amendments that we're working on to supplement the amendments from P&Z. So it's going to be a whole lot of paper and some complexity, but the public draft comments, the public draft version that's been circulating for some months is the document that will still be on the agenda at the Assembly meeting.
Yeah, and what I was trying to say is if we divide the one ordinance into 3 ordinances, that will not result in any changes. Ms. Selcraig.
And just for clarification, if we divide it into 3 ordinances, then people can actually testify on each section. I think that's what people are apprehensive about coming tonight and not sure what it means in terms of dividing it up. So what it would mean is that if we have 3 separate ordinances, people would have an opportunity to testify more than once. They would only once on each ordinance, but it would
Right.
give them a good. Thank you. I think that'll be helpful.
Go ahead, Ms. Osander.
I'm sorry. Mr. Nelson has been out of town. I haven't had a chance to really sit down and talk to him about that, but that's initially the direction we're thinking about going.
Right. And we'll follow this. This process has been ongoing since 2003. So to take our time and move through it for another month or 2 or whatever is not significant in the scope of this whole thing, given the potential for impacts from the adoption of a brand-new land use code. So we're going to take our time and be as thorough as we can be, but we are going to keep moving it along, and there will be a public hearing tonight on those first 4 chapters. Okay. Ms. Osander, anything else on Title 21? Mr. Starr on Finance and Budget.
Yeah, I just make note of a notice meeting on March 24th at 4 p.m. We're going to have a Budget and Finance Committee meeting for a preliminary review of the administration quarterly reports, review of the first quarter budget process, the budget review process for first quarter reviews, as well as a presentation on the managed care, a brief one by our ad hoc chairman.
Okay. Thank you. Everybody got that? First quarter budget revisions are coming up in April, and Mr. Starr starting the Budget and Finance Committee work now. Okay. Mr. Sullivan.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to be introducing an ordinance tonight that I would like the Ethics Committee to look at. I would like to meet with the Ethics Committee members, Mr. Birch, Mr. Clayman, during our break and see if we can come up with a time that works for everyone, and then we'll notify the clerk so we can properly schedule it.
Okay, and that's the one that's going to be laid on the
Yes.
table when we get to it. Okay. Any other committee reports? Seeing none, let's move on, Madam Clerk, to the addendum to the agenda.
Move to incorporate.
Thank you, Ms. Osander.
Second.
Is there a second? Thank you. I'll read it. The addendum. I thought I'd read it if I could find it.
Here it is.
Thank you. Consent agenda, item 9A2, resolution for action. Resolution AR 2008-50, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly honoring Clarice Cyrene for her contributions to the Fairview community, the municipality of Anchorage, and the state of Alaska. Item 9B6, resolutions for action. Resolution AR 2008-51, a resolution of the municipality of Anchorage appropriating $20,227 from Alaska Housing Finance Corporation as a supplemental grant to the state categorical grants fund 231 to the Department of Neighborhoods for weatherization assistance. Assembly Memorandum AM 182-2008 accompanies that resolution. Under old business, we've got Resolution AR 2008-32, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly authorizing the administration to negotiate security services contracts to provide for the presence of armed personnel at the Anchorage Municipal Assembly meetings. Assemblyman Traney and Teshi, this item had been to the Public Safety Committee, and Mr. Clayman addressed it earlier this evening when he said he would reserve his chairman's remarks until that item comes before us. New public hearings, item 14B, 1, ordinance AO 2008-35S. That's a substitute ordinance, an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code of Ordinances 2140-150, B2A Central Business District Core, 2140-160, B2B Central Business District Intermediate, and 2140-170, B2C Central Business District Periphery, to amend the maximum number of amenity points that may be accumulated for a single amenity and to add and adjust point values for design amenities and bonus tables. This is a planning and zoning case number 2008-024. Comes to us from the Planning Department, is accompanied by Assembly Memorandum AM 150-2008. Is there anything to be laid on the table? Any Assembly members? Mr. Sullivan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an ordinance to add to the addendum and move to add it to the addendum.
Can you read it for us?
Yes, this is AO number 2008-43. This is an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code of Ethics, Section 1.15.020, prohibited conduct, and Section 1.15035, additional provisions for elected officials to prohibit acceptance of campaign contributions from individuals and entities currently engaged in certain municipal and school district business requiring ratification or approval by the elected body.
Second.
Can I have a third for third? Thank you. We got a first, second, and third. Have you got that, Madam Clerk? Because you can't push in a third there. Sullivan moved. Mr. Birch seconded. Mr. Bauer thirded.
And just point of clarification, again, when we're just adding it to the addendum, does it not just take
Well, that's right.
two votes just to add it to the addendum? Then if somebody pulls it, then it,
You're
yeah.
right.
Okay.
You're right.
Thank you.
That's right. So it's not introduced, it's added to the addendum. Is there objection to adding it to the addendum? Seeing none, Mr. Starr, Mr. Teshi, any objection to adding it to the addendum? If so, please say so.
I'll wait for the polls.
Thank you.
What-
It would be 9F.
9, sir.
Not, is
think-
that right, the last one? 9F9, folks. New ordinance. Okay, thank you. Is there anything else that anyone is laying on the table tonight? I have no one in the queue. Anything from Mr. Starr or Mr. Teshi? Speak up. Nothing.
No.
Okay. Now, I'm going to ask for unanimous consent to add these items to the addendum. There's the 4 that were brought to us earlier and the 5th one that was laid on the table. Is there any objection to having these 5 items incorporated into the agenda? Mr. Clayman.
I would object it to 9F9 and ask for somebody to get the 3 people or use it on.
You need your mic, number 1. And number 2, this just adds it. We can still pull it from the addendum. It's just adding the addendum to the agenda.
And I
It would not introduce it.
It was not, it was or was not?
Would not introduce it. All we have done is taken 2
Okay.
votes to add it to the
Then,
addendum.
in that case, I don't object.
Okay. There's no then objection to the addendum being incorporated into the agenda. Okay. Thank you. Now, can we go through, we will go through the consent agenda for people to pull them. And I will start with Mr. Trainee. Nothing. Mr. Sullivan.
Item 9A1, sir.
9A1. Thank you. Anything else? I'm
No.
sorry. I'm sorry. And let's just, Mr. Teshi, do you have anything you want to pull?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, 2 items. On the addendum, item number 9F9,
Okay.
and also on the addendum, item 9A2, resolution.
Yeah, we've got the resolution set up for reading and presentation.
Very well. I just want to make sure that happened.
Yeah.
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, okay, hang on. The clerk is telling me something, Mr. Teshi. No one will be here on 9A2. If we pass it, it'll go to the Community Council for presentation. So
That's fine. If nobody is here, then I will not have it pulled.
Okay, so then for correction, 9F9 is the only thing that you wanted to pull.
That is correct.
Thank you. We'll leave 9A2 on so that the person can receive it at the Community Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. If we leave it on the agenda, as everybody knows, it'll pass on the consent agenda. Okay. Now, I'm to Mr. Starr.
No items, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Osiander.
On the regular agenda, 9 Delta 7 and 9E1.
Okay. Ms. Johnston.
Yes, on the regular agenda, I would like to 9B1.
I'm sorry, D as in David or?
E as in boy.
D as in boy. 9B1. Okay. Mr. Birch.
No items.
Mr. Bauer.
No items.
Ms. Selcraig.
No items.
Mr. Clayman.
No items.
Okay. Okay, let's start then. Mr. Sullivan, 9A1.
Move to approve.
Second.
This is a resolution. Is there any objection? Unanimous? Go ahead.
Right.
Oh, yeah, my mistake. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Trainee. I appreciate your help. Let's vote on the items on the consent agenda that were not pulled. Since we're doing voice votes, I would ask for unanimous consent to the agenda as presented with the items pulled off the agenda. Is there objection from anyone? Unanimous consent. Let the record so reflect, Madam Chair. Madam Clerk. Here, have a gavel.
Mr. Chairman?
I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I'm next. Thanks, Matt. Okay. Before we begin with the other items, we would like to ask those of you who were appointed to boards and commissions to come on down, say hello, give us your name and where you're serving, and so we can thank you for doing that. So if you were appointed to a board or commission, please come on down. Don't be shy. Here we go. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Coffey, Mr. Chairman. Hi, Barbara. Dan Toomey. I've been appointed to the Veterans and Military Affairs Commission. Thank you.
Thank you for your service, sir. Anyone else? All right. Oh, come on down. Here we are.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Assembly, my name is John Aho, and I've been appointed to the Geotechnical Advisory Commission.
Thank you. Thank you for your service, John. Nice to see
Mr. Chairman?
you. Yes,
I'd like to make a comment.
Oh, please.
John has been on this commission for a very, very long time, and it's a truly big job, and it's a huge responsibility. How many years have you served?
This will be my fourth decade of being on the commission.
It's just phenomenal. We should have an award. And I believe you served with my mother, or at least interacted with my mother. And when I did my dissertation, I believe I interviewed you. The Geotechnical Commission plays a really important role in terms of securing our health and safety and making critical decisions. They're never very popular, and they are always extremely professional. And, John, I think you've really set the tone there along with a lot of other good people, and I wanted to say thank you tonight. It's really been great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, is there anyone else? Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, he's not here. Usually he reminds me of this, but he didn't have to tonight. He's here. So there he is. Okay. All right, now 9A1, Ms. Ocean. Mr. Sullivan, you moved it. I'm sorry,
Yes.
you pulled it. Go ahead.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Is there objection to this resolution? It's a resolution honoring the 3rd Medical Group. Mr. Starr, Mr. Teshi, I'm assuming you're with us on this. Unanimous consent?
Yes, sir.
All right. Unanimous consent. It's approved. Who's reading and who's?
I am, sir.
Ms. Osiander's reading. Mr. Sullivan's presenting. Go ahead.
Mr.
Do
Chairman?
we have a representative or
Actually,
several?
we do, sir. Colonel Powell and Brigadier General Tinsley, I believe, are going to come
Great.
forth.
I think we're going to bring everybody up.
There you go.
Everybody up. Wonderful.
You bet.
Before I read it, for folks who don't know, this is a remarkable award to recognize that Elmendorf Hospital is the best in the Air Force.
Wow.
That means all over the United States, folks,
Excellent.
and overseas. So with that, I'd like to read this proclamation, if I could. Whereas the military and civilian communities within the municipality of Anchorage have a unique and historic partnership, beginning with the founding of the 11th Air Force at Merrill Field in August 1941. And whereas today over 9,000 active duty military personnel and over 32,000 veterans call Anchorage home. And whereas the 3rd Medical Group staffs the Elmendorf Hospital that provides treatment and medical services to active duty military personnel, their family members, and veterans throughout Alaska. And whereas the 3rd Medical Group started a program called Bringing Alaskans Home, which brought 133 Alaskans wounded in Iraq home to convalesce rather than receiving care in lower 48 facilities, relieving families of financial strain and speeding the healing process. And whereas the 3rd Medical Group partnered with the Army Medical Command and added additional staff to care for the medical needs of an Army Brigade and an Army National Guard battalion nearly simultaneously returning from Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. And whereas, because the operations in Iraq and Afghanistan sadly resulted in a high number of brain injuries due to improvised explosive devices, the 3rd Medical Group created a traumatic brain injury clinic that has assisted 94 returning soldiers. And whereas the 3rd Medical Group created a joint venture with the Veterans Administration, the VA, to increase local access to care for Alaska veterans, resulting in more than a 200% increase in orthopedics and ophthalmology services provided. And whereas this joint venture further reduced referrals for service off-base, saving hundreds of thousands of dollars, and increasing surgery capacity by over 200% for both the military and the VA. Whereas the innovative Takati, I hope I said that right, Top Cover program trains medics through trips to rural Alaska to provide health care in underserved portions of our state. And whereas the Air Force honored the 3rd Medical Group for these many accomplishments by naming Elmendorf Hospital as the best in the Air Force. Now, therefore, the Anchorage Assembly resolves to salute the 3rd Medical Group for this outstanding accomplishment and to call upon all citizens of this municipality, both civilian and military, to recognize their fellow community members for this outstanding level of public service, passed and approved by the Anchorage Municipal Assembly this day. Bravo.
Good evening, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name's Dr. Colonel Eli Powell. I'm the commander of the hospital at Elmendorf. And first of all, I'd like to thank the Anchorage Municipal Assembly, the mayor, and the entire Anchorage community for all the support that they give us. We move around a lot. I've lived in a lot of communities, but nowhere have I ever lived is more supportive than the Anchorage community in the entire state of Alaska of the military and the health care that we are able to provide. I'd also like to this is a team award. As you can tell, we brought the entire team. We brought young people like myself and older people like the young airmen you see behind me. But this award belongs to the whole team, and we couldn't have done it without every person from the youngest airmen to the more senior folks that we have at the Elmendorf Hospital. And as part of that team, we have some of our VA representatives with us today as well. As you know, there is no VA hospital in the state of Alaska. We are the VA hospital for the state of Alaska, and the joint venture that we have with the Veterans Administration as well as with our Tri-West partners enables us to provide this health care. It's an honor and a privilege to care for all Alaskans that we're able to care for the readiness mission, and that we're able to, the TOC-T Top Cover, to the underserved portions in Alaska. We're starting our 3rd mission here in a week, headed out to Kotzebue and Amber, Kevalina, and some of the other villages. So that's a great honor for us to serve all the not only the citizens of the Anchorage community, but the whole state of Alaska. And last but not least is both the Army soldiers, the Coast Guardmen, and the airmen that deploy overseas and are in harm's way every day protecting freedom for our country. It's a great privilege and pleasure for us to care for them. And the program where we're able to bring them home, I think, is one of the best things we've been able to do for the soldiers who have sacrificed so much. So thank you again.
Thank you, sir.
And
Hang on.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Ms. Osiander. Hang on, everyone.
Oh, well, Mr. Mayor, right after you, sir. I wanted to get
Go ahead.
people up for a picture, but you go ahead.
That's one of the key points was, line them up here in a second. But I do want to say one other quick thing. Last night, and I know your dad was at the ceremony last night with some top airmen and women from across the state. I forget how many, General, 12 or 13, but 5 narrowed down. It was an impressive reception last night, dinner, and today's another opportunity to see some incredible work that our bases, our folks who are working on our bases are doing every day. We have done some unique partnerships with the hospital and the folks out there, and it only makes me a little nervous with all the folks here who's at the hospital. And but I know they're well equipped, but they are an exceptional team. And if you've ever, I've toured the hospital. If you ever get a chance, I know they would love to give an opportunity for the assembly to see the great facilities out there, but also see the great people working out there every day. So if you get a chance, do coordinate with them. I know Eli would probably love to do that and show off what we got out there, but it is a huge honor for this base, this hospital, to be recognized as, you said just right on, Ms. Oceana, that it is the best of the best in the Air Force, and that's a great accommodation for the work they do and the VA does. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll arrange the pictures when the people are done. Ms. Osiander, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Trainee. Ms. Osiander.
Well, okay, comments first then.
Yeah.
I want to just say a personal word that my understanding is Colonel Powell was very instrumental in that work to bring our wounded warriors home, and I would just want to say thank you. A lot of folks, that's made an incredible difference. I also want to say thank you to the Armed Services Y, that I know is one of the partners that have worked with you for the WIC program, that babysitting when the service people come in, somebody to watch the kids, and then the chance for the family of the wounded warriors to be there on base. So, it's right. We're a community, and we're absolutely supportive, but I want to thank you, sir.
Yes. The one brief comment is that, of course, you always leave someone out, and I did leave Pete Mulcahy out, and the Armed Forces Y have been so instrumental. We have 2 heroes' homes on Elmendorf Air Force Base for wounded families to reside in as they come and visit the wounded soldiers and help recover and get them on the way to full recovery. We hope in the future that to hear soon this fall if we're going to have construction of a Fisher House from the Fisher Foundation, and so we hope to hear more, and so stay tuned. Thank you.
Well, this assembly is just now learning more about the Armed Services. Why this last budget cycle, we contributed some money to try to help that bus program run, and I wanted to just grab the opportunity to shine a little more light that way, if I could, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Over the course of a year or so, we give out a lot of resolutions, and every now and then you come across one that just doesn't do justice to the folks that we're giving tribute to, and this is one of those occasions. We hand you a resolution, but it doesn't really speak to our appreciation for what you do and in our hearts, and it makes me feel so good to hear you comment back about how Anchorage is to our military community, because we've heard that over the years, and I believe it to be true, and it just really makes us as a community feel extra special to know that we are a team in this, and anything more that we can do to help your efforts, please don't hesitate to tell us. As Ms. Osander mentioned, the minor amount of funding for the YMCA Armed Services that we did, if there's more we can do, please let us know. Thank you.
Training.
Colonel, just wanted to thank you. As a retiree, I go there from time to time. In fact, 2 years ago, you kept me as a guest for about a week. Something about my blood pressure being off the scale. Thank you very much for being there. I know when the news tried to find me, you guys were good enough not to let him out there. And unlike Teshi, I appreciated that. I think Channel 2 got to him. But I appreciate what you do for those of us that are retirees, because there's a lot of us here. In fact, there are a lot here. And we really appreciate the service that we get out there at the hospital. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Selfridge.
I'm in the line to say thank you as well. I think that there are many people in Anchorage that just care very deeply about the soldiers that are coming home. And very few of us really have the tools or the way to do anything. And so, I'm just grateful to you, and I think that the work you do manifests the care this community has for these men and women that are coming back. And I'm honored to have you here tonight. And as Ms. Osiander said, and as Mr. Sullivan said, I think we are here to work with you, and we are grateful for you to be there for these men and women. Thanks very much.
Thank you all very much. There's no one else in the... Ms. Osiander.
One more thing. I'm hoping that we could get everybody in front for a picture, and maybe the assembly could stand up behind folks. If you could just get in kind of a curve.
And I'll come... You push request to speak. I've done it. I know. Not ready. Oh, that'd be great. We got a...
Yeah,
there we go. Yeah, we can. There we go. Bunch up. Here, Paul. Yeah, move in. Tall in the, here, Chris, right here. Matt, Chris.
The boys and the girls.
No, I just said tall, I didn't say good looking.
All right, let's have 3, 1, 2, and 3. All right, I'm going to do one more. All right, 1, 2, and 3.
You get everybody? There we go. Thank you all. Mr. Clayman would like to say something, so if we could disperse here, but for some reason our new system did not recognize him. I can assure him it's not a deliberate sabotage by the chair. Maybe we'll have the clerk see if you are actually roll called in or something, Barbara. You can check why Mr. Clayman doesn't appear on my screen. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Clayman.
Colonel Powell, I particularly want to thank your efforts. It's certainly a reflection of the quality of service that you provide that I only heard about you through our children because they go to West High School together, we met a couple of months ago when I was handing homework off in a parking lot so that your son could get his homework done, and no one ever told me you were in charge, and it's we often talk about bedside manner as a really important part of medical care, and so no one ever told me that you were in charge. They just said you were one of the surgeons taking care of people, but it's a reflection of your entire staff that you approach it with that kind of a humble nature in terms of the treatment you provide. And I really want to thank you personally for all the efforts. And I also think it's a reflection in terms of investment in public buildings that this hospital, just like the Native Medical Center, although the staff remained the same, people's perception of their care improved when they moved into a better facility. And I think we have really benefited as a community from that. And so I really want to thank all your efforts, as well as the entire staff, for really making it a great place for our servicemen and women to be treated.
Thank you, Mr. Clayman. Thank you, Colonel, and everyone, and we will give you one last round of applause for all of your service. Thank you all very much.
What was the deal?
We get one more photo.
We got many. Take your time, as many as you want.
Could you show me that again?
It'd be on the current item.
Okay, that's the current item.
Right.
And then
If you push the request to speak, then you're in.
Hospital that time he was out there, and
Click on it.
I just did.
Yes, you did.
Seemed to be doing
Chairman,
very well.
I refuse to believe it was that as high as they said it was. I thought only steam engines got that high blood pressure.
Mr. Trainee just likes the Jello out there. Sir.
Yeah.
Can't we check?
I think the food was good and the service was better, so he was doing fine. Anyway, it's an honor to have that kind of a facility and these kind of people in our town, and we all know that. 9B1, Ms. Johnston.
Move to approve.
Thank you. Here, push in, folks. Mover and seconder. There we go. Go ahead, Ms. Johnston.
Yes, I just have some concerns about the timing of this resolution. It melds nicely with the pilot program on the lights, but this is also, main impetus is on recycling. And I just wonder if we're getting ourselves into a fix where we're supposed to have a recycling program presented to us on Friday. And I know I'm already getting a number of emails from constituents asking for me to support curbside recycling, and I'm not sure what we're going to be looking at for this. I know personally, I try to do zero waste in my personal life as far as recycling. I also know that I have to kind of come to terms with myself, because if I was really going zero waste, say the newspaper, I recycle a newspaper, but I really shouldn't be getting the newspaper. The newspaper has somebody delivering it to me, wasting gas, getting up there, throwing it out, the ink, the energy that goes into the newspaper so that I recycle it, and I really could get it online. So I can't say I'm really zero waste because I'm addicted to the comics. So I just wonder, I don't want to see the administration get itself in a bind by doing something like this without having a program out for us to say when we have constituents asking about it, this is what the administration is doing. It might be a pilot program, it might be a municipal-wide program, but this is what they're doing to get to a point where we're thinking about zero waste. I just wonder if you have the cart before the horse.
And do you have a recommendation for us based on that concern? Or just thought?
It's a thought. I mean, maybe I would be open to postponing it till April when.
Okay, I have 3 people in the queue. Maybe we'll have a discussion first. I have Ms. Selcraig, Mr. Sullivan, and the mayor. Ms. Selcraig?
I initially submitted this to the administration and talked to them about bringing this at the same time as they brought their proposal on recycling. So I can understand the desire to link it together. However, I think that this in some ways expresses more of an intent. There's not like rules and regulations here. It's an opportunity for us to begin to engage in the discussion in a variety of ways, not just recycling, but there's a whole variety of best practices that has to do with encouraging the kind of packaging that people do in terms of their merchandise. And it just positions us to be engaged in the conversation, not just around how we recycle our trash, but how we think about our work. I noticed tonight, and not to criticize the administration, but we got 2 sheets of paper here that could have been back to back. I mean, it's those ways of thinking about how we can save our resources, and it's not just intended to be at the municipal level, but also intended to engage the community in a conversation, and it just positions us to do that. And I think that in terms of where we are in the world right now, the opportunities to save money around waste is a pretty wise step. So I guess I don't have a huge problem postponing it, but I don't think that it's a majorly important thing to come together. I think it's actually bigger in terms of its intent and intended to be a long-term direction for us.
Mr. Sullivan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. In concurrence with Ms. Johnson's concern, I think what Ms. Selcraig said is correct. I mean, there's some general direction here. It's probably all really good direction. But Zero Waste is an actual organization, and I really haven't seen any literature on them or, what they stand for or what, do they have a more comprehensive agenda than this? We're supporting a specific organization's recommendations without really knowing much about that organization. So I would move to postpone this to the meeting of March 25th.
Can you hold that motion until I've got 5 more people in the queue, and then I'll recognize you or Ms. Johnston at the end.
Then if I could just make one more comment. I'd ask Mr. Herron that before the public or the work session on Friday, if we could get a copy of what's being proposed, because I understand it's already in print. And I'd like to review it before the work session so I can be well-versed on what was going to be discussed. And you said that would happen. And so if you could get it in the clerk's office and get it in our boxes here, before the work session, I'd like to read it ahead of time.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Begich, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Chairman, I think I want to echo what Ms. Selcraig said. I think you're reading way too much into this. It's a statement that says we will achieve and work towards zero waste as an organization. That's just good policy. It's good business. It's good policy, and it saves taxpayers money over the long haul if we do the right thing here. So I think, and I'll leave it to Ms. Selcraig if she's inclined to have it postponed, but it's just a general policy. It's not I think people are reading way too much into this, but it's really a guiding principle. And there's no, the group, as you mentioned, the Zero Waste Organization, I mean, it basically talks about how you attempt to get to less waste in your organizations. That's a good public policy. It's good business, and it does have a benefit for taxpayers down the road. So, again, I don't overread what's in here. Ms. Selcraig, I don't know if I'm on the wrong page here, but I think that's how we looked at this with you.
That's exactly right.
Principle.
It's best practices, and it makes information available to us in the community.
Thank you. Mr. Begich, anything further? Ms. Osiander?
Well, I can tell you why there were concerns. It's the same issue that I brought up Monday at our leadership meeting. It's the AM. Zero Waste is capitalized as an organization, and it basically says this is adopting the policies and practices from Zero Waste, an organization dedicated to reduce. I don't think anybody's complaining about the intent. I think the intent is great. I did receive, because I asked that question, I said, well, let me see what this organization is. I never heard of it. I did get an email back from Mr. Herron that reassured me and said, no, don't, it's not adopting literally the policies of some organization that I'm not familiar with. Instead, it's a general statement of intent that the city will avoid waste. But I could say to the sponsors that this could have been more clearly written. It really could have. If you hadn't capitalized and referred to a specific organization, you wouldn't have had these questions arise.
I'm glad to not capitalize it. I mean, but
Okay.
the issue is simply that.
Ms. Selkirk, we go in order. That's why we have this. Ms. Johnston, then Ms. Selkirk.
I have a little personal thing. I would be more than happy to support this. Does this mean no more 8x10 glossies? Are we going to get a commitment for that? And double-sided copies? And as much on the internet as possible so we don't have any paper?
I'm happy to respond, but I'll wait for the chairman to call on me.
That's a question directed at you, so you're free to respond, Mr. Mayor.
You. That is the focus of this resolution, to strive to that end.
Could I have a commitment?
Well, I support the ordinance or the resolution, so my commitment is to get there. Does that mean it's going to happen tomorrow? No, it will not, Ms. Johnston, because you have a 3,000 employee group, a $450 million budget. You got to turn the Titanic, and I don't want to say it in that phrase, but you got to turn it, and it takes a little while. But
are we
that's
speaking, Mr. Mayor?
No, I just want to say that it takes. We got to get the paper off, and then we won't. So.
Okay. Ms. Selkirk.
I think Ms. Johnson has hit it on the head, which is basically it gives us a framework to begin to have expectations of reducing waste. And not only if actually there's information available about working with businesses in the community to begin to reduce the kind of waste that we have in our refuge site. And I think one of the things that made me interested in this is how expensive it is to maintain kind of the continual response to the garbage that we produce. So I really would encourage you to vote for it tonight. If it's essential that we wait, we can, but I think that this is a broader issue than just a recycling program. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I show you in the queue again. I'm assuming that your prior answer to Ms. Johnston was sufficient. Is that right?
Yes, I'm just
Thank
playing
you.
with the
Mr.
button.
Klayman, you're in.
I would just note there has been some suggestion about putting this off for at least a week until we have other matters before us. And I see zero waste as something that we all believe in. And I don't see this as particularly controversial. And I think if there's those that really aren't prepared to support this tonight, I would certainly encourage putting it off, because I really think this is something that we ought to be able to reach consensus on. And if that means putting it off a week and making minor changes to the language, let's do that. Or else if we can really all support it, let's vote on it tonight.
Yeah. Well, hang on. I'm sorry. Mr. Klayman, that's it. Mr. Sullivan, you're up.
Yeah, and based on that, again, Ms. Osiander and I have both expressed the same concern that Zero Waste is a specific organization, and if at Friday's work session we could just have a brochure on who they are and tell us what they stand for, and maybe an email or a website where we can look them up.
It's on a website. You can instead of bringing a brochure, just Google Zero Waste and you can find it. And they've got a variety of kind of avenues you can look into.
Yeah,
there.
and that'd be
Thank
great,
you.
and that way we'd be a more informed body.
Thanks.
So
Sure.
I would move to postpone this until our next meeting, sir.
Thank you. Now, on the motion, and we try to be recognized by the chair, and on the motion, we have first the mayor.
The only comment I'd make is we're not going to produce a document. I think that's great on this resolution. Zero waste means Google it, and zero waste is on the Google. So please feel free to do that between now and Friday.
And if anyone has...
Ms. Selkirk, I'm sorry, but the process is a little important, so push your button, and I'll be happy to recognize
It's been pushed for quite a while. Am I there? No.
Now, well, that's why, yeah, now you're there.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ms.
I'm
Selkirk.
sorry. I just would like to say if anybody has any comments after reviewing the website and they want to get back to me on them, I'd welcome them.
All right. Anything else on the motion? All right. We're going to put this up. Well, we're not going to put it up on the board. We're going to ask for a roll call. On the motion to postpone for, what is it, till the 25th, Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Thank you. And you got the first and second, or the motion and the second, did you, Madam Clerk? Who was the second? Mr. Birch? Thank you. Okay. Call the roll.
Okay, Mr. Klayman.
Yes.
Dr. Selcraig?
No.
Mr. Bauer?
Yes.
Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
Ms. Osiander?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Trainee? Mr. Teshi?
No.
Mr.
I counted, it's 9 to put it off for 1 week so we can get some information, and 2 that say no, and so that will be put off until the 25th. Thank you. Next item that was pulled. I have 9, hang on, let me look on the addendum. 9D7, is that correct?
Yes.
9D7. Ms. Osiander.
Move to approve. And Mr. Coffey?
Yes, thank you. I wish to declare a potential conflict. This is an appropriation that will go to a tenant of a commercial building which I own out in East Anchorage, the Muldoon Mall. This matter has been before us before. These types of matters, the decision of the body in the past was that I had a financial interest and therefore was conflicted out. I bring it back to you again. Ms. Osiander.
My understanding is that this payment basically is for, would act as a rent payment to a building that you have a financial interest in.
In part, yes. I don't think they
part.
use every nickel for rent, but some of it, yes.
Okay, and as such, I'm going to follow precedent that positions we've taken in the past and rule that you do have a conflict in this matter and urge you to not participate. Is there objection from the body to that ruling?
Order me.
Seeing none. Okay, thank you. I'm not going to urge you. I'm going to order you. Thank you. Is there discussion on this matter? Seeing no discussion, is there objection to adopting this matter?
Move to approve.
There is a motion already on the floor, sir.
There is?
Oh.
Okay.
All right, if that, Madam Ms. Clerk, if you could, Madam Clerk, if you could show the minutes reflect all members approving with the note that Mr. Coffey was not participating in that decision. Thank you. The next matter before us is item E1 on the agenda. Move to accept.
Have a second. Thank you. Go ahead. Who did pull that? You
I
did.
did.
Go ahead, Ms. Osiander, please.
I'm hoping, I thought I saw some representatives from the school district here. I had a couple of questions.
Is there anyone from the school district? Here we go. Mr. McKay? Okay, good. 2 gentlemen are here. Please come down. Thank you.
Thank you.
9E1.
9E1, which is the Anchorage School District 10-year capital improvement program. Thank you very much for coming. And I want to thank you, too, for the work that the district did in re-examining their approach to this document. I think that there's some clarifications and improvements in this version. I did have some concern, though. My principal concern is that the school district, I know I've heard the superintendent now in several venues state that the intent is to align future bonding with the amount of debt being retired. And I have applauded her for that. Is that still the direction that the school district intends to go?
Mr. Vacalis.
Thank you. George Vacalis, Assistant Superintendent for the Anchorage School District. What the district looked at, the previous 6-year plan, and I'm going to answer your question, but it's going to take me a minute to get there. As you know, the district has an awful lot of facilities. We have over almost 8 million square feet of space to maintain. And our buildings range anywhere in age from 2 years, in some cases with renovations, to basically 50-plus years. If we were to straight line this on a 6-year period, the amount that it would take to basically take care of all of these facilities and bring them up to the standard that's required basically would make each year well in excess of $100 million for bonding. We average, as far as paying off each year, We've been paying off anywhere from 30 to 40 million. This year, 44 million by 1 April. Next year will be closer to 50. The year after that will be around 50 million. But the bottom line is our strategy of the last couple of years has been to present to the voters a bond package that does not exceed what we will have paid off during that annual period of time. That is the procedure that we are still intending to follow. I will have to tell you, though, that at some point in time, the district is actually going to have to come in for more than the amount that's being paid off. And the reason is, if we don't do that in some successive years, then we'll never get there. And some of these facilities have got to be done. And we will try, but you know as well as I do, Ms. Ocienda, when you were sitting on the school board, we have things that come up, facilities that definitely need major renovations. You plan for it. You try to make sure that you've guessed the right year that you do these things, but things happen. And sometimes you basically have to speed them up ahead of what the schedule was that you wanted to do them. The bottom line is that if we followed this plan that we've executed for the last couple of years, we'll never get there. And it will be up to the school board to make the recommendation as to when, if any, we'll have to change that philosophy.
Ms. Ociander?
I guess, you know, I heard Ms. Como talk about this document, and it sounded, when she was talking about it, as if you were going to take a longer look. And so I just assumed that that meant that the bites each year would be a little bit smaller. Basically, if I read this correctly, it's showing, of course, the 43 mil this year, but next year a 98 mil. Then it goes to 50, which is within the bubble, but then back up to 97 mil. So it's like you go high
and
like that,
and there
all
is
the way out.
Yes, ma'am, and there is a rationale for that. As you know, we have high schools that are in varying degrees and phases of being completed. So the strategy in this particular document is to address both your elementary and some middle schools as well as our high schools.
Yeah.
And so every other year, you'll see that we are trying to complete a high school. And so the high year would be a high school year. The lower year would be a year for elementary schools. Also, we have or had and are required to have a minimum of a 6-year CIP. And that's what the district has had for years.
I know, yeah.
The reason that we have a 10-year this year is to try to spread it out and lower the cost each year. But again, there's a point of diminishing returns, and we still have to get these projects done. Now, does that mean that just because it shows more than what we're paying off next year, that's what we're going to come forward with? No. But what that document does show is that we've got $760-some million worth of work that has to be done during a given period of time. And the more you spread it out, the less chance you have of getting this work completed before you have to go through a cycle again. And that's why we've gone to a 10-year. It was also at the advice of the Capital Request Advisory Committee that we have that strongly suggested that we not try to spread this out any more than 10 years because it's not a true reflection. When you start going out past 10 years, you really don't have a true reflection of what's really going to happen. So we stretched it to 10.
One of the requests that I know I made and I believe other assembly members made, when we get this document, the public sees it and they see that their school is next on the list, and so they come anticipating that absolutely their school will be on the bond the following year. I can only speak for myself, but I think it's going to be an extremely hard sell to pass a $98 million school bond next year, particularly when we're projecting enrollment declining by 400 some odd students every year for the next 8 years. So, I mean, I read it, but I just, in conscience, I have to tell you that I think it's really going to be a problem. And I personally am going to have a whole lot of trouble following the CIP and putting this for as a bond. I don't think it's realistic.
Well, again, as I mentioned, this is a plan, and this is our best guess at this date and time. This is our best guess based on what we think is feasible and what we can handle. It's no different than any other CIP that either this school district or any other school district or the municipality for that matter. It's a plan. Plans change, but you have to have something down as a guideline. Now, whether or not we're going to go forward with that amount next year, you know, I couldn't tell you today. And I don't think each and every one of the school board members could tell you today. I think they can tell you later on when we start going through and evaluating what we need to do for next year and what the sign of the times are and what other contingencies we have to basically deal with. But right now, that's the plan as it's written down. That does not mean that that's how we'll execute it. It's a plan to get us there. It does not mean that that's what will be executed.
Okay, well, just one last comment. I was disappointed because I agree we need a plan. It's state law. We've got to have this thing, but I wanted a realistic one. And just personally, I have to tell you, I think we're reaching.
Thank you.
Sir.
Ms. Selcraig?
I have comments along the same lines, and that is that when you begin to look at the overall school budget, the amount of costs associated with the capital investment is staggering. It's just, and the thing that worries me over time is that it seems that we are engaged in bonding for maintenance, and I think for major maintenance, things like roofs and significant improvements that we have to do, that makes sense. But I wonder about the strategy of using bonds as the sole tool, and that the idea of eventually, or with time, developing a maintenance fund where we actually have reserves so that we're not in the position of paying for that maintenance item over a 15 or 20-year period. I'm a great supporter of the school district and understand that it's a complex and difficult and huge job to run it. But it seems to me that over the next year, we ought to have some discussions about what are the appropriate ways to meet our capital improvement needs in light of the limited resources that we're faced with in the community right now. I mean, that we're pretty tight in terms of what people are willing to pay for taxes. And things like templates for schools, which I know you're going to, two-story schools, which we use less land. I mean, some of those strategies so that we can begin to over time reduce the amount of money we're spending. So those are just comments. I plan to support this.
I understand, but I'd like to clarify on one of the comments that you made.
Thank you.
And that particular comment had to do with maintenance.
Yes.
What we have here, as far as the systems renewals, are major components. They're capital expenditure items. They're items that the state recognizes as capital. That's why they have authorized 70% debt reimbursement. If we put this into the general operating budget, we would not get or be able to capitalize, nor would the taxpayer be able to benefit from the 70% debt reimbursement. These are valid capital programs. They are major systems. They are roofs. They're heating and ventilation systems. They're major structural changes. So these are capital. And again, putting it in the operating budget, we do not get the benefit of the 70% debt reimbursement. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Osiander? No. I just have a question, Mr. Kalis. When you put the $98 million out there, like was in the column, in the report, that's the capital improvement plan. That doesn't take into consideration, does it, whatever capital grants we may or may not get from the state, plus the 60-40 or the 70-30? Those would reduce it. It's not just bonded indebtedness, right?
Those things, that total amount can be reduced by those things you just mentioned.
Okay. So if you had, say, the $3 billion or whatever we've got surplus this year, you theoretically could go down and get grants from the state that would meet those needs but wouldn't require us to go with bonded indebtedness.
Right.
That's correct. If the state was so inclined to grant some of these projects.
No, I understand that. I mean, you've got that process to go through. But the reason I ask the question is when you say CIP, you're talking about the capital improvement plan. You're not necessarily talking about the ways in which it might be funded.
No, that's the dollar amount of those projects for that particular year. It does not specify where the funding sources are.
Well, And I would like to echo what Ms. Osiander said, and that is, to the degree we can go to the voters and stay within sort of, we're not adding any more, we're right there about what we're retiring and so on, and seek other sources, then that, I think that's helpful to the voters. They're more likely to pass it, and if we double it or something, we're liable to find them giving us nothing, and then we're in worse shape. So.
No, I agree, and we do go for the capital grants, as I think Ms. Osiander remembers, and I know you know that as well.
We all are aware of that. I just wanted to point that out. Okay. Mr. Sullivan.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick comment, George. I just was pleased in looking through it to see that the West High renewal project is not too many years out for design and then for construction, as well as Turning Elementary and Romig. So I know there's been a lot of concerned constituents about West High. It's been a decade and a half since that first phase of renewal, and it's good to see the second and third phases show up on the CIP. So
thank you.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're done. Is there any objection to the acceptance of this report? I ask again, just remind Mr. Starr and Mr. Teshi if there is to speak up, because we're doing it orally. Thank you. That is approved, accepted unanimously. Next item on the agenda is 9F9. I need a motion. Mr. Teshi, I don't know if you want to move to approve. If not, I'll recognize Mr. Sullivan, who brought it.
I'll defer to Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
Move to introduce.
I need seconds.
Second.
Is there a third? No, I don't know. Were you? I didn't catch it. I have Mr. Sullivan hasn't moved and pushed his button. I have.
Sorry.
Now I need a second. I have Ms. Osiander. Now I need a third. Mr. Bauer.
Third.
Yes, third.
All right. Now we've got first, second, and third. The clerk knows the record. I'm going to recognize Mr. Sullivan first, then Mr. Teshi. Mr. Sullivan.
It's been introduced.
Okay. Mr. Teshi.
It's not for debates or discussion at this stage. It's for introduction, and it's been introduced.
Yeah.
The thing we need to do now is set a public hearing date,
And
sir.
you have a recommendation?
April 15th, sir.
Public hearing April 15th. Is Mr. Sullivan correct? I believe he is on his. It's been introduced. Okay.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
I'll give you a point of personal privilege, Mr. Teshi. Please don't take too long. We got appearance requests. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, first, is this going to be heard and decided by the old assembly, that is the current assembly, or the new assembly?
April 15th would be the new assembly because we only go through the consent agenda with the old assembly. And so this would be an ordinance that has a public hearing. It would not be on the consent agenda.
My second question is, Mr. Chairman, I have not seen a copy of this ordinance, and I know that it was laid on the table by Mr. Sullivan. Can I have a copy of that sent to me on an email?
Madam Clerk, can you do that for Mr. Teshi?
We can't do it from here, Mr. Teshi. We can do it tomorrow.
Do you hear her, Mr. Teshi?
Our copies, yes. If she could send it to me tomorrow, she has my email. Are copies available to the public, for the public to see on the record tonight?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Sullivan says yes.
Okay. The other question I have, Mr. Chairman, is I know that there was discussion about the referral of this to the Assembly's Ethics Committee, and the Assembly's Ethics Committee is made up of Mr. Sullivan, as I understand it, and of course Mr. Sullivan supports his own ordinance. My question is this. Would it be more appropriate to have this ordinance looked at and reviewed by the city's Board of Ethics, the independent Board of Ethics that is frequently called on to adjudicate these matters? Would we be better off hearing a recommendation from them?
Well, I think we should certainly solicit their input as we would do with any ordinance, but an ordinance belongs to the body, and just like we'd ask them for input on anything else or planning and zoning.
Well, just like we have input from the Planning and Zoning Commission on zoning matters. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move that this be referred to the Board of Ethics.
Well, okay, hang on a second now. There's a motion. If somebody going to second it, and then we'll have a discussion on wait, please, people. Then we'll have a discussion on the appropriateness of that motion. So.
I second it.
Okay. Please, someone needs to push the button. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
There we go. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Teshi, I think you sort of discussed it. Do you want to discuss it further on your motion to refer?
Not really, Mr. Chairman. I think it's self-explanatory.
Okay. On the motion, I have Mr. Begich, Mr. Klayman. I'm assuming, Mr. Mayor, you on the motion to refer or on the main motion?
He asked the question I was going to ask, if it was going to go to the Ethics Committee or the Ethics Board.
Thank you. I have Mr. Yes, ma'am.
I am at this point confused, Mr. Chairman. You said the main motion and the motion to refer.
I'm sorry.
There's only one motion.
There's only
correct?
one motion. I'm
Thank
sorry.
you, sir.
It's been introduced. My mistake. Mr. Klayman.
Just a point of information, Mr. Teshi. Mr. Sullivan is on the committee. I am on the Ethics Committee, and I believe Mr. Birch are the three people on the Ethics Committee, and so there are three people. It's a fully constituted committee. No. And my understanding, the chair had made comments about if there are certain things that people that are like Mr. Sullivan, who is finishing his term, I understand that in terms of acting on this ordinance, it would not come up. Mr. Sullivan wouldn't vote on it because it'll come up after he has completed his service.
Well, with a public hearing on the 15th, I
Right.
would. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
I'm
now,
just clarifying that,
okay.
that even this is in light of the comments the chair made earlier tonight. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Sullivan.
Yes, thank you. I was going to echo what Mr. Klayman just said. The Ethics Committee is a committee of several members, not just myself, Mr. Teshi. And it's not uncommon for a member who's introduced an ordinance to also be serving on the committee that might review that ordinance. So that's certainly not an unheard of process. But we certainly don't have any problem hearing from the Board of Ethics as well. Anything we sought their opinion certainly in the development of the rewrite of the ethics law last year. In fact, we took over the rewrite of the ethics law when they found themselves unable to proceed with any sort of clarity on it. So while we certainly would accept their advice as a part-time, occasionally meeting body, I don't expect them to be heavily involved in the writing of an ordinance, as we've seen with the rewrite of the ethics ordinance. So I'll seek their advice. I will be cognizant of when they meet, and if they're not going to meet in a timely manner, then maybe they can hold a special session just to consider this ordinance, which would be fine by me. And just, the chair had also mentioned the possibility of a special meeting before the 15th so that exiting members would have an opportunity to get pending legislation heard by the body. I'm not precluding that option, and of course it would have to be properly noticed if there was indeed going to be a change in the public hearing date. So that's just all part of our procedures. If we properly notice it, that can certainly happen. So.
Okay. Yes, I'll recognize Mr. Teshi. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, whether the Assembly chair wants to refer this to the Assembly's own ethics committee is certainly up to the Assembly. I don't speak to that at all. Instead, I speak to the what I think is a requirement that this be reviewed by the independent Board of Ethics. And I think the mayor said something to that effect as well. That Board of Ethics will be called on to administer this and to simply impugn the hard work of that Board of Ethics by saying, well, the Board of Ethics had some trouble with the 56-page amendment to the Code of Ethics last year, and therefore we shouldn't send this relatively a much smaller ordinance to them for review. I think is unfortunate. We should have the independent review and analysis of the very board that's going to be called on.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Hang on.
So again,
point of order.
I would urge adoption of a
Point of order, sir.
I'm sorry. Mr. Teshi, I'm sorry. I'll come back to you, but there's a point of order. Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah, the point of order is that I did agree that the Board of Ethics would review it. So Mr. Teshi's comments are out of order. I have agreed that they should review it.
There's been no action
Thank you.
by the Assembly on this motion, Mr. Chairman.
No, but Mr. Teshi said it was unfortunate it wasn't going that way. And we
All right,
said
folks.
That, so.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Stop. Mr. Traney, point of order.
6:30, we have persons to be heard.
Yes, I know.
We have to take it up to 6:30, sir.
I know. I'm hoping that we'll get through this right now. Is there any further discussion on this motion to refer this to the Board of Ethics? Anything further? Ms. Selcraig?
No.
No. Okay. Is there objection? I'd like to know who supports referring it to the Board of Ethics. Mr. Teshi?
Aye.
Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Anyone else support it?
I do.
Okay, there's 4. I'm sorry, because I got to do roll call because they're on. So there's Mr. Clayman and Ms. Selkrig. That's 4. Anyone else?
Again, I have no objection, sir, to it going to the Board of Ethics.
So is that 5?
Well, what, you support it or you?
I have no objection.
Have a roll call vote, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, fine. I was trying to do that. I thought I would get 1 or 2 objections. Start with a roll call vote, Madam Clerk.
Okay.
In fact, we're going to have to, is it 6:30 yet? All right, we're going to have to put this matter off because we've got appearance requests by our rules. Must start at 6:30, no later than 6:30. We'll come back to this matter. All right, we have 2 appearance requests. Mr. Bud Knox. Mr. Knox here this evening. Here we are. I don't know the last one. That's just an appropriation, yeah.
Thank you, Lord, that I'm not on the assembly.
Good evening. Hi.
Good evening, Mr. Coffey, Mr. Rainey. I started not to come in here tonight, but I figured this needed to be said to somebody. Something happened to me a couple of weeks ago that it kept me up all night thinking, what if? And some idiot pulled a gun on me. Yeah, in our town right here. He's a punk with a hood on. He pulled out in front of him. I missed him about that far. I pulled up beside him, and I got a 45 ACP laying right here. I could have nailed him right there through the window. I didn't do it. I've already talked to you about that. I teach classes. I teach concealed carry classes. Authorized to do fingerprints, state troopers and all that stuff. Been doing it for years. One of the things in my class is if you can back out of it, do it, because if you shoot him, you're going to go to court. You're going to get sued. Some scumbag lawyer out there, sorry, Mr. Coffey.
I think that was directed at Mr. Clayman.
All of you.
Or Mr. Teshi. Or all 3 of us.
Especially Mr. Teshi. Is going to come up and take his case, and somebody's going to come up and say, oh, he was a good child, he was a good kid. Well, where were you when he was pulling the gun on me? I have no doubts that I could have got away with it. One thing in my class, I say to these guys, these kids in there, these people in there, if you can back out of it, back out of it, because you don't. And the first thing that hit my mind when it happened, and he put the gun up, he did like this. I could see his lips moving. Every time I tried to pull up, he pulled up beside me. I tried to back up, he backed up. I finally got ahead of him and tried to pull over. Every time I did that, he pulled over because he knew I wanted to get his license plate. I was in a one-way lane going into town. I couldn't turn around there in the middle. And if I did back up and go see him, and he got out with a weapon, it's my fault if I'd have shot him because I confronted him. But if I'd have shot him through the glass, I'd have got away with it. Not roll my glass down, shot him through the glass. Boom, 45 ACP, knocked him out just like that. All 10 shots. The point I'm trying to make is here, we got a gang problem in this town, and the chief just told me they're doing something about it. But I've talked to a couple of officers. No, I think we only got 4 guys in the gang unit. Is that it? Well, I was told 4 or 5. But there's something, and they can't do it by themselves. I back up the police department 100%. I got a couple of buddies of mine in the police department, and we have the top cops in the United States as far as I'm concerned. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with the honor room. Do you know what the honor room is? Do any of you know what the honor room is? No, you don't.
Yes.
Go to the police department.
Station. Yeah.
Huh? Look on the right side. I got the honor of naming it the honor room. Our fallen guys are in there. I got that honor to name it, and I'm a big part of putting that room together. But you know what? We don't have any money to take care of it. They don't have money to take care of it. It looks like really trash when you walk in there. It's bad. You walk around and see it's just black all around the floors. Nobody takes care of that. And we don't know why are we not backing up our police. We are. But they need help. And they can't do it by themselves. And I'm not calling them on my house every 4 or 5 minutes, every 15, 20 minutes. I got cameras all the way around my house. You come in my house, you're dead. I guarantee you. I'll shoot you outside and drag you inside. That's a promise.
Okay.
But the thing is, what's the deal of this kid going down the street pointing a gun? You know, he's got a hood on. I identified him to the lady on the phone. Now, here's what got me. He followed me all the way up to the station. And I figured, well, I'm leaving. I'm going past it. So I went past. He pulled into the station. I went around the block. I said, well, I'll see if he's there. By the time I got there, 3 cops pulled in. They stood there, and 2 of them stood there and interviewed me for 45 minutes, and they could have got this guy. I'm going to talk to the chief about that.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any questions? Mr. Trainee.
I'm glad you're right, Bud, and I have no doubt at all because I've seen you shoot. It would have been over with in a quick matter of seconds.
Pardon?
The guy would have been out of the way in a quick matter of seconds, Bud, because I've seen you shoot before.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Glad you're all right.
Well, I'll tell you what, the Air Force is hard to act to follow because those guys are good. They've taken care of me a couple of times. I'm a disabled vet, and I go out there sometime. Those guys are better than any hospital we got. I can tell you that right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I wanted to let you know, Mr. Knox, that under ordinances, there's an appropriation coming up on the 25th of $113,440 for the Anti-Gang Initiative Program. And we're trying to get the resources and trying to put the officers to deal with the program. You're absolutely right. There is one. It's a very difficult problem, but here's some more money coming at it, whether it does any
What
good or
about
not.
the money
we'll
for the honor room? Can we get some money for that?
Well, not tonight, sir. So thank you very much.
I don't want to
You can have the chief come forward and ask for it. Perhaps
Okay,
that'll
what
get-
about this? I got one question for you. If I'd have nailed this guy, would you have defended me?
How much? I might, if we could reach a fee agreement.
Oh, no fees. No, you're
Thank you.
You do it for free.
We got to keep moving along here. Thank you very much for coming down, sir. Pardon me. We have another appearance request. Mr. Kennedy, Geoff Kennedy, are you here this evening, sir? Good evening.
The name is Jeff Kennedy, sir.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Kennedy.
Good evening. Thanks, Bud. You're a tough act to follow. Bud probably doesn't remember me, but he helped me with a clogged drain back when I lived in Fairbanks, and he lived in Fairbanks in around 1980. Bud, you're a tough act to follow, but thanks for raising the issue of crime, because I want to talk about crime, too. Let's have a show of hands of you Assembly members. How many of you support commuting sentences of child molesters who say they did what they had to do to protect our country's national security? How many of you support freeing bank robbers who say they're only raising money for the war on terrorism? How many want to let burglars go if they say they oppose abortion and same-sex marriage? How many would let murderers go if they said 9/11 changes everything and old laws don't apply to them? What about the guy caught peeping into women's restrooms? How many would believe this was only part of his surveillance program against suspected terrorists? Well, good. Looks like nobody here favors coddling private sector criminals. What about government criminals? This month, Brattleboro and Marlboro, Vermont, decided to indict President Bush and Vice President Cheney for crimes against the Constitution. Alaskans are Americans, too. I support a resolution authorizing Anchorage police to arrest Bush and Cheney the next time they set foot in our town, if they're not impeached first. Doing so sends a message. 1, Alaskans are just as tough on crime as Vermonters. 2, we're a law and order city that recognizes and obeys the Constitution and international law. And 3, Anchorage is not a sanctuary city for either private sector or government criminals. Now, some may argue this is a moot point because Bush and Cheney are unlikely to set foot in our town before they leave office. But we need to send a message to future presidents. You do the crime, you do the time. Any questions? Thanks.
No one in the queue. Thank you, sir. We're going to take our dinner break now. All right. Thank you, folks. All right. We'll be back at 7:10. coming.
Hey, hi, I'm here.
Okay.
Yes?
All right, we've got a full body. We have 11 members present, 2 in the room, 9 in the room, and 2 on the phone. Here we go. We left off at appearance requests at 9F9. On the floor is a motion to refer this matter to the city's ethics board, and we're going to do a roll call vote, and we're going to start with Mr. Teshi. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Teschke, yes. Mr. Trainee? Yes. Mr. Sullivan?
No.
Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
No.
Ms. Osiander? Ms. Johnston?
No.
Mr. Birch?
No.
Mr. Bauer?
No.
Dr. Selcraig?
Yes.
Mr. Klayman?
Yes.
What's the vote, Madam Clerk?
The vote is 5 yes and 6 no.
Okay, so now the next one is I am going to make a referral to the Ethics Committee of the Assembly. With that referral, I ask that body to meet soon enough to hear it. Just a second, Mr. Sullivan, prior to the time set for the public hearing, and I would urge the body, the committee, to contact the Ethics Board to see if they would like to give us their opinion in some fashion. And the reason for that, and the reason I voted no, is because I believe the Assembly's business belongs in Assembly committees, and occasionally and in this case and others, we seek advice from those who have some level of expertise. Mr. Sullivan.
Yes, I spoke with Mr. Klayman and Mr. Birch during the break. We're going to have the Ethics Committee meet at 4 o'clock on March 25th, which is an hour before we convene our Assembly meeting, and we'll meet here in the chambers. And I will invite members of the Ethics Board, if they'd like to sit in, to certainly join us.
Okay. All right. That is it on 9F9. It's now scheduled for public hearing on April 15th. Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes?
I just have one query, just as a procedural matter. If it was the view of one or more on the Ethics Committee that we were interested in asking a legal opinion from the Department of Law prior to the Assembly taking it up, that would be something to discuss at the committee meeting as opposed to now.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You've got wide-ranging authority to give us a full examination and a full report on what you think about it. Ms. Selcraig, I think the machine's working. We can check in, but go ahead, Ms. Selcraig.
Am I there? Am I
No,
showing?
you're not.
I've got you pushed. I don't know why. Anyhow, I would like to just make...
Hang on. I don't know. Start voting. Hang on. We shouldn't... No. Go ahead, Ms. Osi. Can you put us on the topic, and then maybe that'll help? I think that's the reason we're showing votes up there, not the topic. Go ahead, Ms. Selcraig.
I just wanted to notice that I am going to be interested in a legal opinion, and it just seems to me it's a natural thing to do, so I'm urging the committee to do that. Thank you.
Okay. All right. That concludes the consent agenda. We are now on to old business. That's 11A. Resolution AR 2007-300, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly supporting adoption of the clean election system in Alaska. It's accompanied by Assembly Memorandum AM 793-2007. There's a motion to approve on the floor. Mr. Trainee moved and Mr. Teshi seconded. Mr. Trainee? You were the mover.
Thank you. Since Mr. Teshi's not here today, why don't we move this to the 15th?
Second.
We'll get the new assembly to weigh in on this.
Wait, I'll recognize you. I hear you, Mr. Teshi. Go ahead. There's a motion and a second. Speak to your motion, Mr. Trainee.
Because this is going to have long-term implications for the new people coming on board on this assembly, old members are leaving, I think it needs to be postponed to the 15th of April, sir, for action that night.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Teshi?
Mr. Chairman, I would just as soon see this voted on tonight. I think the Assembly should take action. It's been around for quite some time. I for one, am very comfortable with voting on this right now. I think we should get on with business and let the public know how we feel about this.
Thank you. Ms. Selcraig?
I'd like to be added as a sponsor to this item. And I'm very open to the idea of waiting to the 15th because I do think that the new assembly will be impacted by this. So I guess I'm speaking to Mr. Teshi's suggestion. Mr. Trainer's suggestion.
All right. Mr. Klayman?
Just a procedural point, because this is old business as opposed to new business. Who votes on it on the 15th?
Well, it's a resolution, so there's no public hearing. So anyone who votes on it on the 15th?
In other words, would it be the old assembly?
Yes, no.
This assembly or the new assembly?
No, it would be the new assembly. Old business is not consent agenda item. Okay, Mr. Johnston. Ms. Johnston, please.
Just a point of information, this resolution is for a state law, and do we know, does this have any impact on assembly candidates if we support the state on clean elections? Is this just for state candidates, or is it for also municipal candidates?
The committee heard it, so can someone from the committee respond? The elections committee heard it. Who's on the?
Yes. I can answer her question.
Okay.
And that is that I know several people who support. Ms. Selcraig's chair is going up and down.
Well, we have chair problems this evening. Go ahead.
Several people who support this, and their comment was, this should be applied. We should do this so it applies to the city too. And so it was clear that the Clean Elections Initiative that's going to be voted on in August only affects state races and has no impact on municipal races.
Okay. I have Ms. Osiander.
I wanted to respond to that, too, because I've been reading about it. There's a $6 million fiscal note for state legislative candidates for next year, and it's only state.
Okay. That's any other information anybody wants to share or comment? Madam Clerk, please call the roll on the motion to postpone this matter until the 15th of April.
Mr. Klayman?
Yes.
Dr. Selcraig?
Yes.
Mr. Bauer?
Yes.
Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
Ms. Osiander? Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
Mr. Teshi?
No.
And the
Please
vote is 10-1.
Thank you. That matter is put off till April 15th. Thank you. Item 11B, it's AR 2008-32, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly authorizing the administration to negotiate security service contracts to provide for presence of armed personnel on duty at Anchorage Municipal Assembly meetings. And there is a motion to approve on the floor by Ms. Selcraig, seconded by Mr. Trainee. Ms. Selcraig.
No, I'm sorry. Don't mean to be. I have no comment.
Go ahead if you want.
No, that's fine. Mr. Trainee, I'm just recognizing the people. Mr. Klayman.
And this is where I had asked earlier
Yes.
to provide what I had learned from the Public Safety Committee meeting. We heard from both Deputy Chief Plummer as well as two different police officers who had been involved in an audit of the municipal building, and they provide us a lot of information about security in the municipal building, and that led to the recommendation that they start allowing armed security guards at the municipal building. I asked them particularly about what their thoughts were about security generally at the assembly chambers. They talked about how they did a kind of a security audit of the municipal building, and that hasn't been done here for the assembly chambers. That was something they recommended, and I would certainly support asking the police department to do that. I think the interesting question that they raised was from a standpoint of security. If we were really, I guess if we as an assembly really want to get more serious about security in the chamber, that the real step to do for security is to actually become like the courthouses and like the airports and get metal detectors and not just have armed guards. If there is a concern that really provides a level of security that an armed guard does not. The police department didn't have problems with armed guards. They're supportive of armed guards here. I think in general, I think it's fine to go forward with the proposal as set forth. I think it raises an important question about what level of security do we feel we want here in this chambers. And I think there are some issues that probably should be addressed that I think would come up through an audit of these chambers by the police department that might improve some security that wouldn't be as costly as, say, getting metal detectors. But those are questions I think we should be thinking about. And another alternative rather than acting on this now might be to wait to act until after we've had that security audit done to see whether we might choose to do different things instead of armed guards. Those are kind of the issues as I see it, and certainly if there are questions in terms of what I heard at the committee hearing, I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We simply need to pass this. It's time we realize we do not live in a safe society. I want these guards to be able to protect themselves, us, and the public that comes here. And I think the best way is to have these people armed. We've had lots of numerous instances. I was talking to John Wood, who was on the Assembly with me years ago. When he was here, they had to take a guy down that had a gun here in the chambers. Another time, there was a guy they found over by his car standing, and he ended up disposing of the gun under his car. So there are people that bring weapons here, and we just need to have a certain level of security for the guards that have been asked to do this job, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Selcraig.
I find this really challenging. It seems to me that if we have if it's legal to bring guns to public places, we have before us a complex situation where it probably does make sense to have guards. But yet, in the context of what Mr. Klayman was talking about, is that at the courthouse, basically you go through a medical detector. I mean, you go through that process of ensuring that there aren't guns in the courtroom. And so what this really raises for me is this issue of guns in public places and kind of the need to possibly go back and revisit how wise it is to assume that it's appropriate to bring guns to public meetings. It's a tough one for me because I just think there's an awful lot of guns out there, and we're seeing the outcome of it, and that there's probably some structure where we can respect people's right to have a gun and also respect people's right to gather in public places without the threats of guns. So I find this a really complicated and challenging situation, and I'm likely going to vote for it, but with the caveat that I actually don't think anybody in the room needs to come here with a gun to address the Assembly.
Thank you. Mr. Traney again.
Just that the state took that option away from us, Sheila. The state, when they passed the last law relative to weapons, took us out as an agency or a building that you can screen people for guns at. Every individual that comes in here can come in here with a weapon. The state has preempted our right as a city to deal with that question.
So I have a question in that
Thank
context.
you, Ms. Selcraig. Are you done, Mr. Traney?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Selcraig, go ahead.
I guess so if we wanted to take another route based on what Mr. Klayman was talking about, if we wanted to choose to have some sort of security guard that process that people went through, we can't do that because because of the state legislation. So that option really isn't available to us.
That's correct.
Traney. Thank you. All right.
Do you have a comment about that?
Mr. Klayman.
The issue that Mr. Traney raises is one that was not brought to the Public Safety Committee. I actually have a question for the municipal attorney about whether or not the municipal attorney agrees with Mr. Traney's analysis.
Mr. Reeves.
Mr. Klayman, through the chair, I have not researched that question for the purpose of this discussion, but I am quite sure that Mr. Traney is correct.
Thank you.
If someone wants me to look at it and respond in writing, I'll do that.
Thank you. No one's making that request right now. Mr. Mayor, you and I spoke on Monday. You indicated that you were moving ahead with your plans that you announced a month or 6 weeks ago, regardless of this, because of the identified security risks at City Hall and here. Is that correct?
Yes, unless Mr. Abbott has anything changed. Nope, we are moving forward.
Thank you. And no more discussion. Let's vote on the resolution. Go ahead, Madam Clerk. Well, let me ask this. Ask unanimous consent for the resolution of Mr. Traney. Is there objection? Seeing none, that's passed by unanimous consent. Thank you. Now we're at item 13A, a continued public hearing on AR 2007-195, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage granting KAPP LLC a 10-year real property tax exemption, consecutive 5-year tax deferral for redevelopment of certain deteriorated real property subject to certain conditions preceding. Public hearing on this matter is now open. Anyone wishing to testify on this matter? It relates to the power plant down in Ship Creek, which was determined several years ago to be deteriorated property. Anyone wishing to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing on this matter is closed. For information, I spoke with Mr. Marlowe, who is the proponent today. Hang on. No, go ahead. Today and earlier, and he would like this matter postponed indefinitely. He will retain his his deteriorated property classification, and if he gets some of his issues resolved, he may, or may not, for that matter, be back in front of us with a new resolution. Yeah, go ahead. Does anybody want to?
Second.
Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Osiander.
I moved to postpone it indefinitely, sir, and it was seconded.
Okay, I'm sorry, and I've got them both in there. Thank you very much. Ask unanimous consent on the motion to postpone indefinitely on item 2007-195, the tax deferral and tax exemption for the power plant in Ship Creek. Without objection, that postponement is approved. We're now on new public hearings, folks. Item 14A, an ordinance amending Exeter Municipal Code 4.50.020, the bidding review board.
Mr. Chair, can we come back briefly to 11B as I just requested?
11B has been approved.
Right. I
had
meant
personal privilege. Go ahead, Mr. Clayman.
The issue I had raised was I had mentioned the issue of an assembly chamber audit with the police department. From the police department, do we need to make a formal assembly request to do that, or can we just ask you to do that and let us know after you've done it?
Yeah, put it on the record.
Through the chair, Mr. Clayman, no. In fact, we'll do a site survey just like we did for the Hill building.
Thank you. Time frame, Chief? Month, week, 2 days?
If you give me 30 days, we'll do a good one.
Thank you. Mr. Clayman, thank you. Anything further on that? All right. All right. 14A is this ordinance, and the public hearing on this matter on the change of the representation on the board of bidding review board. It's a technical housekeeping matter. Anyone wishing to testify on this matter, please come forward. Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the body? Ms. Osiander.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? No one's in the queue? Thank you. No one's in the queue. Is there objection to the approval of item 14A, 2008-37? Any objection? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, reflect that that matter is approved unanimously. Item 14B, note there's an S version. This is AO 2008-35 and 35S.
Point of personal privilege?
Yes, ma'am.
I plan to make a motion, just if you're interested in testifying, I plan to make a motion to postpone this for 1 week, and I have some reasons for doing that I will delineate when I have the opportunity.
Well, let me see a show of hands of who wishes to testify on this tonight. 1, 2, 3. Okay. If Ms. Osiander moves to postpone 1 week, and if it's approved, there will be a continued public hearing next week. We will have a public hearing tonight. Anyone who wishes to testify may. I don't know what the results of the 1 week delay were. Ms. Osiander, could you enlighten the people?
I'm interested in two particular things. I've had extensive conversations with people over the last 2 days. I also spoke with the Anchorage Chamber of Commerce, and I got an email from them requesting a little more time to look at this and the implications of this from their board of directors. Specifically, I'm interested in examining the possibility of adding a bonus point for underground parking in the core of the central business district. I'm also interested in adding additional bonus points for public restrooms. The discussion I've had with the planning staff is they'd like a little more time to look at the implications of adding underground parking. So that is a very narrow framework, but since both planning staff and the Anchorage Chamber asked for an additional week, that's why I plan to do that. So you're certainly free to testify now or next week if the body approves the postponement. Mr. Chairman, do you want?
No, I just want to make sure we got that. There were some materials that were handed out. Since Debbie was speaking, I took the opportunity to pass them on down. Okay. Folks, it's up to you. I don't know what the view is on postponing indefinite or postponing for 1 week. Let's go through this. Mr. Birch?
I just had a request for a personal disclosure, and that would be that the company I am employed by, Nana Development Corporation, is an investor in a building downtown is potentially impacted by this ordinance.
All right. Mr. Birch is making a declaration of a potential conflict. Mr. Birch, you're employed by this company. Do you have any financial interest in this? Would this affect your finances on a personal level?
No.
So it's a potential personal interest, I would take it, because of your employer-employee relationship. And here's the question that applies to that. Do you believe that you can vote in the public interest and put aside the personal business employer-employee relationship and put the public interest first on this?
Yes.
All right. Based on that, I rule that Mr. Birch can participate fully in this matter, in fact, shall participate fully in this matter. And I would note this. This is an ordinance which would affect any development downtown. It's in 3 of the downtown districts. So if Mr. Birch's company gets involved in a project and builds it, they would be subject to this ordinance, assuming it passes, or if anybody else was ever involved in that. It's not just for that potential project which may or may not come to fruition. That's part and parcel of my ruling, and the fact that Mr. Birch represents that he can take and put the public interest above his employer-employee relationship, then for that reason I ruled as I did. Is there objection? I'm sorry?
Objection to what?
What? My ruling? Why? Okay. Okay. The new machines kind of get us. Okay, now, public hearing, folks. Here's what I would like. Ms. Selcraig, you're in the queue. Go ahead.
I just wanted to respond to Ms. Oceander's comment about postponing.
Yes,
Is this an
I think
appropriate
it's a
time
good
to do it?
idea to let the people know how we feel about putting this off.
Right.
So if you could say that.
I actually am comfortable, at least at this point, supporting this, but I'm also comfortable giving us a week to refine it. So I would be glad to have a little time. I've got some questions, for example, 15 points for bike racks. There's some things in here that if I had a little time, I would refine. And if there's an opportunity to do that in 1 week and still make these changes available in a timely time for construction this spring, I think that it would be worthwhile.
All right. Anyone else have an opinion on putting this thing off for a week?
Well, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Mr. Sullivan.
Point of order. We should just
conclude
the public hearing. Motion to continue it to a date certain, and then we can talk about why we want to continue.
I thought if we get some indication it would help. Mr. Klayman, on that, leave it go if you want.
I'll withdraw because it's actually, if we're going to open the public hearing, I can get it answered in the public hearing.
Okay. Let's have the public testimony. Sorry for a little bit of confusion. I didn't know there was going to be that motion. Go ahead, Mr. Potter.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Assembly, for the record, my name is Tim Potter with Dow Engineers. I have a short version and a long version. I'll go with a medium version tonight. First of all, right off the top, I request that the Assembly approve and adopt this ordinance, preferably tonight, just because of some significant financial timing associated with some board meetings with at least one of the investors in a significant project downtown, about a $55 million project. Historically, you know that the B2 districts were originally adopted with the bonus point system in the late 70s. And there was a minor rewrite performed primarily by Mr. Bruce Phelps in 1984-85. So that puts at best the most recent significant changes 22 years ago. I've passed out tonight a letter from Mark Hinshaw, who in fact was a young planner in Anchorage in the late 70s that was originally involved in writing the bonus point system. He's now a very prolific writer and a very prominent planner in the Pacific Northwest and through APA on a national level. And we contacted him just to get his concept of the changes that we were proposing on a very minor and interim basis. And Mark was actually quite surprised that, in fact, the bonus point system had not been changed or really reviewed for as long as it had been. And his recollection was it was supposed to have been looked at about every 5 years to keep current with what trends were and what other activities and pressures there were in the downtown area. I passed out another handout, and that's a small map, hard to read, but it's got a number of stars on it that show quite a number of significant office buildings that have been developed in Midtown, some of them even with parking structures in an urban design format. And at the same time, you need to ask yourself why is the National Park Service office building, the only significant office building that's been built downtown in at least 2 to 2.5 decades. While there's been over the buildings that are on that map and aerial photo represent about 1.6 million square feet. The downtown plan that you guys approved back in December calls for a significant increase in office space downtown. What's interesting is that there's no points for office right now, so you don't even get bonus points for putting something in that's actually a goal. And you have a goal by 2025 to have about 2.5 million more square feet of office space downtown. And in fact, in the next 5 years, you want to have about 500,000 more square feet of office. The projects that are actually representative of why Ken Burkhart, myself, Don Allspaw, and the municipal staff have brought these minor and very modest interim changes forward actually would get you to that goal within the next 5 years. As you may understand, the bonus system in the B2 districts was a donut shape, a bullseye target approach, a very dense development in the middle, slightly less dense, and then even less dense, but still dense development on acreage standpoint in downtown. And it identified types of uses that were appropriate in different places and then established a base level maximum that you could build to, and also indicated that you didn't have any required parking. And it was represented at that time that the municipality would be responsible for providing strategically located significant parking structures throughout downtown to service those needs. Unfortunately, the city hasn't kept up, whatever reasons over time. Things change, budget change. So as people are trying to develop major facilities downtown, in order to meet their tenant needs to provide parking, they're being forced to provide that parking on site. Usually goes under the building and several floors up. That takes them into a position where their building needs to be taller, so they have to have more bonus points, and it's like a dog chasing its tail trying to get there. And we have, based on Ken's and mine's and Don Allspaw and the staff's review, looked at a variety of projects now that I've been involved in over about the last 5 years in downtown, none of which have come to fruition, primarily because of limitations associated with the bonus point system. So we've worked over the last 6 months to try and bring these, I think, non-controversial, fairly clear and simple minor corrections that will allow projects to go forward and still be supportive and in line with the comp plan for downtown that the Assembly approved in December. I know that the larger effort to redo, and I know that Ms. Selcraig and Ms. Osiander, especially Ms. Osiander being involved in the Title 21 for as long as she has been in the rewrite, probably recognizes why the B2 districts was pulled out, because it's in and of itself another very complex set of rules and regulations to analyze. And it's really a back and forth system that you really have to run sample projects through to understand what's going on. So that was actually pulled out of the initial Title 21 rewrite that we've been working on for the last 6 years. I think it'll probably take a couple of years to redo the B2 zoning districts in whatever format they come out to be, based on the downtown comp plan that the Assembly approved. So I'd be more than happy to volunteer my services, as I think that I'll try and convince Mr. Burkhart to as well, who's an architect in town and also sits on the Zoning Board of Examiners and Appeals, to volunteer time to sit on a committee that would review these things.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Potter. We have given you your 3+.
I'd be happy to answer any questions associated with any of the specific changes.
You've got them. Ms. Selcraig?
Would you speak to the issue of this, if this was postponed, how dire that would be in terms of the people you're working with? If we're just talking 1 week?
The board meeting of one associated project is April 1st, and pushing to the 28th, not being in control of that agenda and that meeting and the events of the day. I'd feel much more comfortable knowing that it was approved tonight than putting it off a week. But that would still fall within the window, but is very difficult, and it's a very significant date.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Clayman?
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Chairman. It'd be the 25th, Mr. Potter, not the 28th.
Oh, the 25th. That's better
Thank you.
by a couple of days.
Mr. Clayman?
As I understand, one of the things we've learned as part of this process is that the point system really is something we should be reviewing every 3 to 5 years and updating so that it stays consistent with our community goals.
That's very correct. We've actually changed, based on a variety of things, our focus in trying to make downtown a more comfortable, pedestrian-oriented, active place. Getting residential downtown, getting a lot of office downtown. You give bonus points for residential. You give bonus points for hotels. You don't give bonus points for office space in the current format. It wasn't until recently, a couple of years ago, that you even gave bonus points for heated sidewalks, which is a very significant activity that's been pressed forward in recent days.
Right. Well, my question in connection with these, and the question of whether we should vote on this tonight or whether we should put it off for a week, is whether we can, if we voted on it tonight, there's, under the kind of revised thinking about the bonus points, is that it would be appropriate if there were a couple of other changes, we could take those up in 2 months or 6 months or a year from now after we've had a bit more time to work on it, and we wouldn't be, acting tonight doesn't prevent us from making some modifications.
Oh, absolutely. If there's a committee formed, I know there's a consultant on board working with the city right now, that if there were very specific changes that needed to come forward that were, very clearly in the community's best interest, those may be able to come forward on a next time basis, and that's fine. But right now, as much as I believe that Ms. Osiander has 2 key specific things to look at, we worked very hard over the last 6 months to condense these things down to an absolute limited number of non-controversial things that were very much in line with the plan that you approved. And my fear would be that once underground parking in the B2A district, that may not stay the B2A district, maybe the core has shifted a bit, maybe it's almost fully developed already, and there really may not be a need for significant underground parking because there's already the PAC and other things there that will prevent that from happening. So I'm worried that 2 things may lead to 6, and then it might be 20. And there's probably 1,000 things that need to be looked at.
And of the 2 things that Ms. Osiander has raised, is your sense that there are those things currently addressed, and your understanding is she wants to address them differently, or they're not addressed at all?
They are not covered in ours. I do not believe that there's a prohibition of providing that parking underground. If you provide more than 50 spaces in a parking structure, even underground, it pushes the project to a conditional use review in all 3 of the downtown districts. So,
okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I noted in the P&Z resolution, the Planning and Zoning Commission, I understand they heard this thing twice, right?
They did.
And they've made a finding in their resolution, the need to take intermediary action, because we all recognize that the 2 or 3 years you've talked about for the downtown plan and regulations associated with that. Do you anticipate that in the context of that you will evaluate these bonus points that are being proposed and others as possible ways in which to enhance the downtown development?
Absolutely. Right now, I guess I'd look to Tom, but I don't know that we even have a clue what the outcome of the new zoning will be. It may not even have a bonus point system. It may have absolute instructions on what has to be included. I don't know exactly what it's going to be, and that's what needs to be looked at.
Okay. We've asked about what's the downside if we put this off for a short period of time. Let me ask you this. If we adopt it tonight, what's the downside? The other side of it. What's the harm?
We as a group that have worked on this and certainly asked Mr. Nelson, do not believe that there is a downside. I know that Ms. Osiander has been worried, and so is Ms. Zelcraig, that there may be some loophole that's opened up. We've looked at it pretty carefully. The streetscape is still honored with a 25% of all bonus points have to be done on the streetscape side. I believe that it doesn't change the ability of this ordinance to control the development, and I don't see any loopholes in it. You won't see 27 bike racks. It's limited by a total number. It does modify the points that you can get for different types of new technology type of bike racks and those types of things. It actually even encourages you to put in wider walkways than what is currently required by the code.
Thank you. Ms. Selcraig?
I'm the one that raised bike racks only because it seems odd to me that 15 points is given for a bike rack and 1 point is given for 70 feet of open space, which is a really valuable thing in terms of the streetscape. So I'm generally comfortable with the changes and want to support an opportunity to revise this right now. But what would be the rationale for seeing a bike, one bike rack as more valuable than 70 feet of open space in terms of a plaza? What was the rationale there? Why are bike racks so highly valued? I mean, they're the highest valued things on the list, actually. I guess skywalks are also up there. But in terms of what they offered the streetscape, it seemed like it just seems odd to me. And I guess what was the rationale behind that?
The rationale is for a couple of things. Part of the downtown plan and the 2020 plan that you're very familiar with really focuses on trying to get people out of their cars and commuting to work, commuting around downtown during the day, either as a pedestrian or a bicycle rider, not just during the summer months, but possibly year-round. And having the ability to have a secure place to put your bike, which is not your basic Schwinn from 30 years ago. The frames of these bikes are costing $3,000 and up, is something that is necessary to get people that are participating in that to go and lock up their bike and feel that they can. The Planning and Zoning Commission actually went further and wanted to make sure that there were lockers and changing rooms and showers that were available, and to get bonus points to further encourage people to alternative modes of transportation and working out, which again, the mayor's not in the room, but that was one of the outcomes of the obesity task force too, is recommendations to do whatever was possible to increase people's desire or ability to work out morning, noon, after work, and still be able to do it from work.
But I guess what I'm wondering is I don't disagree with any of that. That makes a lot of sense to me. But what's odd to me is that it's a 15-pointer. I think that's what's odd to me. It seems to me it's an opportunity to just kind of stack some points without doing much. And in contrast to, the downtown plan is really about a streetscape and a really viable streetscape. So, I'm happy to see the bike racks on here. I just can't imagine why a bike rack, a covered bike rack, is 15. It means that you can put 3 bike racks in, and that's equivalent to, you would have to get that many points, you would have to put miles, or at least a mile of open space in. It's just an odd, it's 70 feet for one.
Well, that's not
not a mile, but a big.
That's not necessarily true, I don't think, and we can certainly model that for you to see what the difference is.
The numbers are.
But the bike racks are capped at a maximum of 3.
Right, but
Even
three gives you, that would give you 45 points for 3. I'm just suggesting that these are good changes in terms of things that we need, but maybe some evaluation about some of the weighting might be useful in terms of, giving maybe more points, if we're going to actually more points to an open plaza or landscaped area, or more points to a wider sidewalk. Those are things that really do make a difference in terms of downtown areas. And
at least we're adding that you can get
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I started out by saying I plan to support this, but it seems like maybe a little tweaking of some of these numbers will result in us getting at least a short-term fix that is a little bit more refined in terms of the outcome and the improvements on the street.
I think what you want to look at is that you get 1 point for every 75 square feet of sidewalk that's in addition to the 11.5 feet. And let's just say that if 45 points, you do the math.
3,150 square feet.
It's a little over 3,000 square feet, or 30 by 100, or 3 feet by, 400, whatever it may be. And it may be a 3-foot wide expansion along a 300-foot long block. So, it is, I think, in a reality basis. So, should it be 2 points? Maybe it should.
All right. No one else? Thank you, Mr. Potter. Anyone else wishing to testify, please come forward. Thank you. Please state your name and begin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Chris Schutte. I am the Policy and Communications Director for Anchorage Downtown Partnership. In addition, I served on the project management group for the Downtown Comprehensive Plan, which many of you worked on as well. I'm here tonight to ask that you approve AO 2008-35. I think that this ordinance amends the outdated bonus points system for the CBD and does so in a way that will promote quality, pedestrian-friendly environment at the street level, and is consistent with many of the recommendations contained within the Downtown Comprehensive Plan. The bonus point system, as we heard, was established to ensure that there are pedestrian-level amenities in many of the buildings downtown. The changes proposed in this ordinance, I think, maintain that goal and actually provide even greater incentives for certain projects to provide these vital amenities. And it goes even further and asks for things like bonus points for wind studies and mitigation effects, bike racks, as we just talked about, wider sidewalks, and many others. And don't forget parking, which we all know is an extremely hot topic in downtown right now. The ordinance proposes more bonus points for buildings that provide parking to building tenants, something that will provide both actual and perceptual relief, I think, to the problem of parking in downtown. Anchorage Downtown Partnership realizes that the changes proposed in this ordinance are merely interim measures until the regulatory components of the comprehensive plan are finalized or created, I guess. We also realize that some of these changes haven't undergone the thorough analysis that Dr. Selcraig brought up, or an economic impact analysis for that matter. However, because the ordinance specifically recognizes that the planning department is working on those regulatory changes for the CBD, and because there is no set timeline yet for instituting those new regulations for the CBD, we support the changes within this ordinance as a vital temporary measure that will allow development projects as envisioned by both the 2020 comp plan and the comprehensive downtown plan until such time as those new regulations are in place. So for those reasons, we respectfully request that you approve this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Hang on. Ms. Osiander, then Mr. Klayman. Ms. Osiander.
You mentioned parking. These bonus points do not give anything for parking in the core area. There's no bonus point at all for that. And one
not
of
in
the
these
questions,
changes, correct?
Pardon me?
Not in the changes proposed in the ordinance.
Correct. It does add that for the 2B and the 2C, but not the 2A. So that was actually one of the questions that I wanted to mull over. I know you're familiar with a plan we adopted for downtown that talked about that being a pedestrian area. Mm-hmm. What do you think about adding underground parking in that area, in the core?
Well, I think wherever it's, if there is potential for underground parking in areas that alleviate geotechnical concerns, I see no reason why underground parking shouldn't be considered.
Okay. And my other question is, I know a lot of the downtown business area owners are also members of the Anchorage Chamber of Commerce. I talked to them today, and the message I got back from them was they wanted a little time on this. Have you had a chance to talk to anybody on the Anchorage Chamber Board of Directors about this?
Not directly with the Chamber Board, although we have talked about this with our member businesses, like you said, many of whom are also members of the Chamber, and we have not heard about a desire to look at this further.
What I'm hearing back in a very preliminary fashion, because I just really started looking at this a few days ago, was that people just didn't really know what was going on, don't really know, they didn't look at specifically what the changes are, and just want a chance to know more. Is that what you got from your members, and how thoroughly have your members reviewed this?
I think that's an understandable request from them. As far as our membership, many of them were involved in the public process for the comp plan, so they have a general familiarity with the bonus point system.
Right.
and they saw the language of the ordinance, and I think, I can't say for 100% whether or not they understood the full implications of it, but generally with the members that we discussed it with, they saw it as a positive incentive to get the kind of development that they were envisioning in the whole comp plan motivated and get it going.
I haven't talked to anybody who actually believes that we shouldn't redo the bonus plan or the bonus points. It's just a question of, since whatever we do probably, I think realistically, is going to be in place for a couple of years until the consultant comes back with the economic analysis and the real technical recommendations of how to make it even and fair, and the 15 points for the bike racks versus the 3 points for the sidewalks. You know, is it the correct way to do it, kind of our gut feeling on the floor, or do we want to rely on the technical expertise of somebody who's going to assess the cost benefit? I'd prefer to do that, but whatever we do on this is going to be in place, unfortunately, not for a month or two. I know the workload that the planning staff has got, and I know Title 21 is first, and then the downtown plan is second. So my guess is realistically over 2 years.
Sure.
So whatever we do is going to be there and going to have some impact. So I think the concern I've heard is that, you know, what's the points? How should it be set? Is that, do you think that's realistic?
I think that's realistic, yes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Mr. Klayman?
Where is the downtown partnership in terms of the pros and cons of putting this off for a week or voting tonight?
We have no opinion either way. We just wanted to make sure that our support for the changes that we've seen so far is on the record. And from what you discussed earlier, it sounds like the points on which you want to discuss this further wouldn't significantly alter the ordinance, so we're okay with it.
Thank you. There's no one else in the queue. Anyone else wishing to testify, please come forward. Thank you. Good evening, sir.
My name is Ken Burkhardt. I'm a principal at KPB Architects here in Anchorage. And would just like to offer a couple of thoughts. That really the key provision for this ordinance change is changing the single amenity cap from 1 point per 200 square feet of site area to 1 point per 100 square feet of site area. The bike racks, parking, all those things pale in comparison to the importance of this primary issue. And it's overly restrictive and I think somewhat arbitrary. And to put that into focus, for the Atwood office building downtown, which is 42,000 square feet in size in terms of site area, the current limitation, there's a number of underground parking spaces for that building, and for a half-city block, it's capped at 16 parking spaces. Certainly, that building requires much more than 16 parking spaces. They provide more than 16 parking spaces, but this current ordinance limits them to 16 parking spaces is how many they get bonus points for. And in reference to a couple of downtown office buildings, the ConocoPhillips building benefits from having a site area of 3/4 of a city block. They require approximately 900 bonus points for that development there. If the ConocoPhillips building was built on a quarter of a city block or a half city block, no way they would have penciled out and that project wouldn't have been built. Likewise, the Atwood office building was originally designed for foundations for 2 towers. It meets the bonus points for 1 tower. There is no way that it has approximately 600 bonus points right now, but they wouldn't have been able to build the 2nd tower. The Patillo parking garage was exempted from this bonus point approval process. Likely that also would not have been able to meet these bonus points requirements. So when you're looking at something like 900 bonus points for the ConocoPhillips tower or 600 for the Atwood building, a discussion of 15 points for bike racks sort of pales in comparison. In relation to the B2A and underground parking, I think that likely should have parking, underground parking as part of the bonus points there. But the B2A is a very small area. I think it's probably something like 12 square blocks that's already built up. And I don't think that necessarily you're going to see projects, or buildings demolished and anything happening in the short time horizon. So I would try to encourage the Assembly to act on this, that this has been noticed publicly in terms of Planning and Zoning Department or Planning and Zoning Commission on their agenda for a couple of months here because it was postponed on one occasion. So I think this has been in front of the public eye. Downtown community councils have not had any input, negative or positive, to this. So I think I would follow Planning and Zoning and Planning Department's recommendations and approve this.
Ms. Osiander.
No, sir, he answered my questions as he spoke.
Ms. Selcraig.
I just wanted to actually comment that the issue is that we actually have this list. I mean, and we're actually altering the list. And you're exactly right. When you talk about 1 point or 15 points and you look at the need for 900 points, it begins to be kind of nitpicky. But in the end, this is the system that we've got and we're using. So I think that, I think the comments are to strengthen it. And I appreciate significantly your comment about the need to recognize the value of parking, and I don't think there's any doubt here. So I just wanted to comment that I appreciate the comments, and I think we're going to take them into consideration.
Yeah, my only fear is that this 1 week might go to 2 weeks to 3 weeks, that the Planning and Zoning Commission thought that, well, we probably ought to reconsider skywalks because those close off view corridors, and I guess I'm afraid that this gets caught in a do loop and this isn't brought to conclusion in 1 week's time.
I don't think that's the intent.
Thank you. Nobody else in the queue. Anyone else wishing to testify? Anyone at all? All right. I'm not going to close the public hearing now until, because there may be a postponement. Is that objectionable to anybody?
Move to continue the public hearing to our next meeting.
Second, that gives us something to discuss.
There you go. There you go. Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Osiander.
Well, I think I've already explained this. I had 2 conversations and an email from some folks with the Anchorage Chamber who asked for some more time. I also have had now 2 or 3, actually 4 conversations with Planning Department staff just in the last 24 hours, asking them questions. I asked to see a map of the B2A, and there's nothing available to show me right now. So Mr. Nelson said, give me a week, and that jived with what the Anchorage Chamber said. I think that the intent here is good. I did have, well, I'll wait on the debate on the merits when I have a chance.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes, on the question to postpone, I'm, as the Assembly rep to the Chamber, along with Mr. Birch, sensitive to their request, but I guess compelled by the testimony that this has been out in the public for a long time, and certainly any requests for additional information could have been gathered by the Chamber and others. So I'll wait to see how the others, what the rest of the debate is before making a final decision. But right now, I guess I'm compelled to move forward with it, just because, again, this is long-standing out there in the public eye. And as the last gentleman mentioned, the really big change is the square footage allotment and not the minor amenities. And those can always be brought back for change later with minor amendments. But I'm not so sure that compels us to hold up the whole document.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Ms. Selcraig, you seconded the motion, did you not?
Yes.
Please push the button to help the clerk. Thank you. And you're up next. Go ahead, Ms. Selcraig.
Thank you. I think that this is generally a really good idea. I'm really happy to see it before us. I think that we do need to act as quickly as possible in many ways to meet the needs of developers downtown. However, it's my sense that we heard from Mr. Potter that, in fact, if we act on this next week, it still will meet critical issues that are before us in terms of the development. And we have an opportunity within a week to make some changes in this that will make it better. And my hunch is that we're not really going to get back to this for another 2 years in terms of really resolving it. And if we can do some things that improve it over this week with the help of the Planning Department, and particularly addressing the opportunity in the core area and encouraging parking in buildings in that area, I think it's really beneficial. I also think that, just a mini review of some of these points would be useful. And what we'll do then in this week's time is result in a better ordinance that will work better for us for another 2 years.
Thank you. Mr. Birch,
I would speak against postponement. I think this is an issue that we can address more fully if we need to. I think we've got Title 21 considerations going on. I think there's been testimony that this is timely, and I was very enamored with the comment regarding do loops. I haven't heard do loops used since I was working on an IBM 360 Model 40 in the basement of the Duckering building in Fairbanks, Alaska, about 40 years ago. So
there you go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Birch. There's no one else in the queue. I will note this Friday work session. We start at 10. We have 10 to noon, the economic impacts of Title 21. Noon to 2, the joint meeting with the school board. 2 to 3:30, recycling. 3:30 to 4:30, road improvement districts. Ms. Osiander?
There was not a request for work session.
I understand that. I'm just trying to figure out when we would do all of this stuff if we delay. And since no one else was in the queue, I was taking an opportunity to speak briefly. It's been vetted. The Planning and Zoning Commission vetted it. The department has vetted it. Push the button, Mr. Klayman. Go ahead. You're not in yet. I don't know why. Thank you. Well, go ahead.
I'm trying to punch the button.
Go ahead, Mr. Klayman.
Well, your question more from Mr. Nelson. It seems to me that this has been to Planning and Zoning. It's been looked at by your department as well. If we delay for a week, is there any real potential that we would get input from your department in that week and input from Planning and Zoning in that week?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Klayman, you would not likely get any input from the Planning and Zoning Commission, and what we would be focusing on are basically the specific issues that members of the Assembly have raised, and that we would be investigating those. We'd be providing the map of the B2A district. Didn't have it here this evening. So we would try to clarify and be prepared to respond to the specific issues that raised tonight that were not part of the consideration that was before the Planning and Zoning Commission.
And I take it if we approve this tonight, but then there's a real effort to want to add some bonus points about underground parking, add some bonus points about restrooms just in a fairly smaller range, that could be taken up much sooner than 2 years from now.
Yes. In fact, the one issue that really is concerned to planning would be looking at the implications of the parking in the B2A. The other one, as far as increasing the bonus point for public restrooms, is something that we would support. We could act on that this evening. The one that really had us concerned is the issue regarding parking in the core area.
All right. Thank you.
You done, Mr. Klayman? Push your button now and let's see what happens. No, sorry. Are you pushing the right button this time? Okay, it still doesn't show.
So did I, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry.
I pushed the button.
You're not in it either. Madam Clerk, could you maybe find out if anything's going on? Where's our technical guys? Okay, just hands up, guys. Mr. Traney?
Just that I'm ready to deal with this tonight, sir.
Yeah. I wanted to recognize all of my fellow members before I spoke. Does anybody else wish to say anything? Here's the thing. Mr. Nelson, is there anything that prevents you in a timely fashion, without having to rush, without having to ignore the economic impact statement, without having to ignore chapters 4, 5, and 6, which are also before us, without having to stop work and come back to this, is there anything in the next 30 to 60 days that you couldn't address and bring to us on this bonus point system that might enhance it a little bit, without trying to do it in a hurry?
I guess the intent was to the answer is yes, we could come back, but we also support the passage of the ordinance, the substitute ordinance that is before you. We could probably tweak it to address the issues up or down next week on those items that have been raised tonight. Our concern is the same. Are we going to be opening it up to a lot more tinkering with the point value system of these bonus points? And this is something that we are going to be looking at much more comprehensively, and looking at the value of them relative to the value of construction in the overall rewrite of the downtown district. And we would rather save our resources to go through that process at that time. What we're looking at here is basically an interim measure that is consistent with the direction given in the downtown area and other parts of Anchorage relative to high-rise office development.
Thank you. I have nothing further. Is there nobody else in the queue? Mr. Starr, Mr. Teshi, anything?
No.
Thank you. We have the motion to continue the public hearing 1 week. Please call the roll, Madam Clerk. Motion to continue the public hearing for 1 week is before us. Oh, no, stand by just 1 second, folks. We have a new system. We want them to try to make it work. We'll take a brief stand down here while they take a look at it for her. I'm going to go get a water. Stretch your legs, folks. Hug your neighbor. Let's go back to work.
Hello?
Yeah, we're back at it. We got the computers fixed.
Alan?
Or the staff trained, one of the two.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we've got a full body. We're back at this. Now, Madam Clerk, would you conduct the roll on the question of postponing the public hearing?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Ms. Osiander?
Postpone the public hearing.
Ms. Johnston?
No.
Mr. Birch?
No.
Mr. Bauer?
No.
Dr. Selcraig?
Yes.
Mr. Klayman?
No.
Mr. Teshi?
No.
Mr. Trainee?
No.
Mr. Sullivan?
No.
Mr. Starr?
No.
Mr. Coffey?
No.
The vote was 2 yes and 9 no.
Okay. We didn't postpone the public hearing.
Move the S version.
Wait a sec.
Oh, sorry.
Wait a sec. I'm going to ask one more time. Is there anybody who wishes to testify on this matter before I close the public hearing? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing on this is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move the S version.
Is there a second? Thank you. Mr. Sullivan moved. Mr. Trainee seconded. Discuss your motion, Mr. Sullivan.
Well, I think we have a document that makes a lot of sense. We've heard from the Planning Department, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and certainly the people who have testified have been supportive, and I think this body would be wise to follow their advice.
Thank you. Ms. Osiander, I'll give you a moment. Okay, proceed. And folks, one of the reasons you don't show up, you may have your cursor on something other than the item under discussion. So make sure that your 14B ordinance AO, so on and so forth, bonus points, is lit up in blue. And then if you push the request to speak button, you will be on my cue. Oh yeah, and if you look on the top screen, the fourth icon over from the left is a piece of paper with a red line on it. If you touch that, you'll always go to the item that the clerk has up. Actually, that's not entirely true. Because I just did it.
14B1?
Okay, never mind. Let's just move along. Okay, Ms. Osiander has the floor. Go ahead, Debbie.
Two amendments and some general comments. I'll do the amendments
We'll do the amendments first, please.
Yes, sir. I'd like to amend the document in section B2A, B2B, and B2C. And I can give you a page number in a second.
Just make the motion, and then we'll
All right.
find out where it goes.
To change the bonus point category, public restrooms at ground level. Currently, it reads 1 point per 35 square feet. I'd like to amend that to 5 points per 35
Page
square
and line, please.
feet. Yes, sir. I was told it wasn't necessary, but I would be happy to do that. Unfortunately,
Public restrooms. If you look on the S version, folks, page 3, it's the second item down on page 3.
only for 2A. And for 2B,
I know. Yeah, you got it.
is
Let's do one at a time.
On
page 6.
About 6 items down.
Right.
And then on the last one,
C, it is on,
page 9, about 4 from the bottom.
yes, sir, thank you.
And
Mr.
so each one would
Coffey.
go 5 points per 100 square feet?
Yes, sir.
If you notice, there's different square footages in each one. Are you going to leave them the same?
I am.
All right. Was there a second? Hold it, folks. We need to clear the mover and the second again. Madam Clerk? Okay, Osiander, who seconded? Mr. Trainee, push your button. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Osiander, we got your motion. Everybody clear? 5 points instead of 1 point. Discussion, Ms. Osiander?
I have gone through a lot of discussion and reading on this over the last 2 or 3 days. My main concern with it, after the initial concern that was that it benefited one particular project by venture capital. So I've gotten beyond that. And my main concern is that this is a fairly arbitrary amendment of our bonus points, and I wish that we could look at it analytically based on a sound cost-benefit study. Unfortunately, we don't have the resources to do that right now. I appreciate that that's coming, but it is at least 2 years out and maybe longer. So whatever we do now is interim as a quick fix, and there's no way to really deal thoroughly with the point that Ms. Selkrig brought up about, is it really good to have 15 points for a bike rack, or is it really good to have 50 points for the wind study analysis? I don't know. I have no way of telling. I didn't particularly want to do this on the fly. The only way I know to do this so it feels fair is to go with the comprehensive plan for downtown, to go with the comprehensive plan and the downtown plan that we've adopted, and to judge to my own personal sense what's the highest priority. So I thought streetscape, amenities for the public at large. I thought about parking. And so I looked, and there's sidewalk benefits, which are good. There's open space, which is good. There's the heated sidewalk thing, which we're still going to get into and analyze. But I thought about bathrooms, and I looked and it seemed an obvious omission to me. My understanding of the amendments here is there was a desire to really not get into this in a broad brush fashion, but to just add to the significant points that had come up recently in discussion. And as such, it wasn't looked at thoroughly and comprehensively. It was looked at somewhat piecemeal. So I'm going to try to improve a little bit in a comprehensive fashion, and to me, parking and bathrooms seemed easy to grab, since sidewalks were already done.
All right.
Second.
There's no one, it's already been moved and seconded. There's no one else in the queue.
Wait, I'm in the queue and I'm on the right place.
Are you on the
I'm there.
topic?
I'm on the topic and I'm in the queue, according to my machine.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know. Go ahead, Ms. Selkrig.
I would like to ask Ms. Osiander to consider a friendly amendment to her. And that would be to reduce the covered bike racks to 3 points, the enclosed bike racks to 5 points, and increase the open plaza to 20 points.
Ms. Selkrig, I'm not necessarily against that, but it would be simpler to just deal with one thing at a time, I
Okay,
think.
whatever's easiest, okay.
Okay, Mr. Trainee? Mr. Clayman?
Question for Mr. Nelson with planning. How are you on the increasing the points for restrooms?
We have no objection.
Thank you.
I have no one else in the queue on the amendment. There's no one else. Go ahead. Call the roll, Madam Clerk. No.
One amendment.
One amendment. One amendment, adding it, making the public restrooms a 5-point item in all 3 districts. Yeah, 3 districts, yes, that's right. On the pages identified. Let me just ask this. Unanimous consent for the amendments?
Am I in or not?
Yes, now you are.
Okay. I just wanted to hear from staff. I mean, you'd mentioned, Tom, that, these weren't your big considerations, but, I mean, is this acceptable to the department?
Yes, it is.
Okay, very good.
We see it as a benefit.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Selkrig.
I'd like to make an amendment.
An amendment to the amendment?
No, I'm sorry, we didn't vote, sorry. I thought it just passed.
Mr. Sullivan asked to get in the queue, ask a question about
Yeah,
it.
my question precluded the vote. We now
Yes.
vote. Yes.
Okay.
I apologize for being late with my question.
You're next, Ms. Selcraig, but let's get
Sure.
now, here we are, folks. Rather than roll call, I'm asking for unanimous consent on the amendment to make it 5 bonus points for public restrooms rather than 1 in all 3 districts. I hear no objection. Reflect unanimous consent. Ms. Selcraig.
I'd like to make an amendment.
Yes.
And that amendment would be to reduce the bike racks from 10 points to 3, the enclosed bike racks, enclosed and secured bike racks from 15 points to 5, and to increase the open plaza from 1 to 15.
I'm sorry, Ms. Selcraig. I think you may find that they agree with 1 and not with 2. If you could do them one at a time. Let's do the
so should we do the bike racks
yes,
first?
Please.
I'd like to reduce the bike racks from 10 to 3, and the covered and enclosed bike racks from 15 to 5.
They have, I just point this out, page 2, in the B2A district, they have bike racks open, bike racks covered, bike racks enclosed and secured. I'm not sure what your amendment refers to on
The first one, bike racks open, I would like to reduce to 3.
Okay.
Bike racks covered, I would like to reduce to 3. And bike racks enclosed and secure, I'd like to reduce to 5.
Right, and that's the B1A.
Yes.
Is there anything in the B2B district relative to bike racks? There are, if you look on the bottom of page 5, the last item, they have the same 3 categories.
And I would like to do the same thing in those categories.
And that is 3, 3, and 5?
Yes.
And for two
No, I'll show you. 3, 3, and 5. And finally, in the last section,
I would like to make it apply to all sections.
well, okay, there you go. Thank you. Okay.
Hit your motion button.
Now let's have a second, please.
I'm waiting for the motion button to clear.
She moved to reduce the points on those 3 things.
I know. I was waiting for her motion to show up on the screen.
Please.
Yep,
There you
second.
go. Now it's there. And Mr. Sullivan has seconded. Go ahead, Ms. Selcraig. I think the point is
Shall I
obvious.
make my second motion at the same time?
No.
Is that- Okay, well, all right.
Get this one done.
Why am I suggesting this?
Well, I think we know it, but go ahead briefly.
I think
wanna-
I've already
Yes.
reviewed this, is that I think that it's just from my planning experience and my knowledge of the Central Business District Plan, that the bike racks, giving that many points to the bike racks seemed out of sync with the intent of really working on streetscape.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Klayman.
I'll speak against the motion as somebody who likes to bike downtown whenever I can, and I'll often getting to places and having to run all over the place to find a place to park my bike and park it safely. I think bikes deserve the points that they've suggested. I think the points that are suggested is a process of a lot of careful discussion amongst different interested parties downtown, and I strongly oppose the amendment.
Okay. Ms. Selcraig.
It's my hunch in response to Mr. Klayman's comment is that 3 points is a lot of points for a bike rack. I mean,
Thank you.
I think you'll still get my.
Let's get staff. Mr. Nelson on bike rack points.
The key issue really is the cap. And as long as you're not changing the cap, the effect of reducing the point value per bicycle space is basically it would add a couple of additional bicycle spaces in order to meet the cap. So in light of that, in the grand scheme of things, we would not have any objection.
And nor do you see any need to make the change? Is it 6 of one, half dozen of another?
It amounts to a difference of a couple of bike racks, bike spaces.
Thank you. Let's vote on this, folks. First, I will ask for unanimous consent to the amendments. If there's objection, I'll call the roll. There's objection. Call the roll. Does everybody know what the motion is? All 3 say, okay, I won't restate it. Go ahead. Call the roll, Madam Clerk.
Dr. Selcraig?
Yes.
Mr. Klayman?
No.
Mr. Teshi?
No.
Mr. Trainee? Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Starr?
No.
Mr. Coffey?
No.
Ms. Osiander?
Yes.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
Mr. Birch? Mr. Bauer?
No.
Go ahead, Madam
Chairman,
Clerk. Announce the results.
That failed 5-6.
Ms. Selcraig, you're up. Next set of of amendments. Thank you.
I'd like to move to increase open plazas to 15, from 1 to 15 per square foot, because open plazas are a wonderful asset to
Okay,
downtown.
hang on, just make your motion, we'll save that. That's on the bottom
And
of
that-
page 2, open air plaza or landscape?
Yeah,
1
and-
point per 70 square feet?
Right, and 15, and.
No, help me with it.
1 point, open air plazas or landscape, 1 point per 70 square feet, and then it
What-
goes
maximum.
on to 1 point for 80 square feet, and I would like to change it 15 points for 70 square feet and 20 points for 80 square feet.
Okay. And that's in the B2A.
And I'd like to have that applied to each district.
Let's make sure it's there in each district. Open, yes, it's okay, and it's on page 6 in the B, 2B, and it's on page,
Oh, that one, the plaza. Okay, thanks.
no, it's a different, if you look at B2C, the square footage is different. Do you want to keep it the same, 15 and 20?
I need to look at, I'm sorry.
It's on page 9, about 3/4 of the way down. It's a 1 point per 100 square feet and 1 point per 115. You want to make it 15 and 20?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second? Clear the board, Madam Clerk, if you can.
1 point per.
Okay, Miss, oh, no, not yet. Miss, hang on just a sec. Can you get her? Oh, on the mover. You have Mr. Sullivan in training. What you need to do is have,
I have nobody in mind.
well, am I on the? 1 point per. I'm on 14B. There we go. Ms. Selcraig, push the moving. And who's seconding?
Well, somebody said.
Is there a second?
Second.
Who is that?
The mayor.
Mayor.
Well, that's because we don't want to hear from you on this stuff.
Second.
All right. Oh, now I'm the second, according to the...
No, you are, but we put a note in that it's...
Okay, fine. Ms. Selcraig.
Yes.
Go ahead. Discuss your motion.
As we develop with taller buildings, we should really reward development when they are willing to step back. For example, is it the Key Bank? And when you begin to see areas that step back from the sidewalk and provide open space, it's a really valuable thing. And I think that the number of points that we were giving for that kind of benefit was significantly lower if you figure you can get, when you begin to look at the points available for other things, 40 points for a wind study. It's a really valuable asset, and this doesn't make anybody do it, but what it does is it really rewards development when they provide open space, and it ends up being a real incentive for them to do that, so that if they're going to build a really tall building, they begin to really contribute to the streetscape. So it's just an incentive. It certainly wouldn't require anybody to do it, and it just rewards them at a greater level and encourages it. And I think in the end, we'll be happy we did it if we support it.
Thank you, Ms. Osander.
Mr. Nelson, I'm getting nervous because I don't know the implication of that motion. What would that do to the cap? Does it make our buildings still viable that we want to put forth? I don't. Talk to me about this amendment, would you please? Talk to me,
It's hard
Mr.
to give you a
Nelson.
definitive answer because there is no cap. I mean.
So there's basically no.
No, so it's, on the one hand, Ms. Selcraig is correct in that what we are trying to promote is more open space in the downtown area, which is tough to do in light of the value of the land area that we're talking about. So there is a benefit in having an incentive to provide open air plazas. On the other hand, what the implications are for how much gross square footage that could actually add to the building and the impact that may have is hard to assess. And that's why it's hard, if you're making a significant change to these bonus points, to determine what the ultimate implications are.
Yeah, which
You know,
is why I'd rather have the consultant do this than us.
But certainly the notion, the idea that you want to encourage open-air plazas is certainly consistent with the downtown plan.
Thanks, sir.
Ms. Osander? You done? Ms. Selcraig?
I would just make the point that the danger here would be that the building would get too tall. But what we're really doing is that if the building gets too tall, we're basically allowing the building to step back, which you see all over cities all over the world. And it seems to me that it's not really dangerous. I mean, what we're really allowing is we're allowing somebody to build a taller building if they dedicate more plaza area. So I think you can just see this kind of trade going on all over the place, and it'll serve as an incentive. If we've got several new buildings coming in right now, why not give them a real incentive to provide some open space downtown? Why not position them to think, well, gosh, we can put another floor on, or we can put another 2 floors on if we give up some space at the street. And nobody's requiring them to do that, but we're creating a real incentive to do that.
Mr. Burke.
I mean,
yeah, I'm concerned about this kind of winging it on these changes that seem to be pretty profound. We've had the information here and the waiting for some time, and it's typically on something like this would be my preference that the questions that are a result of the ordinance that we have in front of us that those get telegraphed to the staff maybe a few days ahead of the meeting so that they can deal with that. So I guess I would speak against this change and encourage the body to take up some of the recommendations in the next go around, as we have. I think the staff has referenced that we can deal with that down the road. So I would speak against those changes. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Selcraig again.
well, I think we asked for an extra week, and that wasn't satisfactory, and I'm sorry I didn't bring these forward to the staff sooner. I did talk to the staff about several items on this list and express concerns. The thing is that we've got we've got representatives here this evening explaining to us that it's really important that we do these things because we've got buildings that want to be built this summer. And my thought is that if we've got buildings that want to be built this summer and that they want an opportunity to build taller buildings, and we've got a downtown plan that talks about a more beautiful and open streetscape, that this is one way to at least impact those buildings. We're talking about doing a more refined review in 2 years. That's fine, but buildings are going to be built this summer. And when you start looking, what we've got here is for wind studies and for parking and for showers and for bike racks. You can begin to add floors to the building. Well, those things are not directly going to benefit the streetscape. And this item would, and it would provide a real incentive for these developments to, in fact, dedicate some land to open space in front of their buildings. So I urge you to support it. I think I've been at this a long time, and my sense is that this will work.
There's no one else in the queue. Mr. Nelson, when I see going from 1 to 15 and 1 to 20, that just because of the magnitude of the change, it causes me to wonder, does that matter? Or am I worried about something I shouldn't even be worried about, since it's voluntary?
Yeah. It's hard to judge, but my understanding is it is relative to the current point value, it is a significant change to the point value. My understanding is it's going basically from 1 point per 70 or 1 point per 80 square feet down to 15 and into 20 square feet. So I think that Mr. Burkhart was correct in saying that the biggest, most significant change to this ordinance is basically changing the value, the maximum value that you can get from one amenity. Okay. That is the most significant, because that basically doubles the current point value. For instance, he used the example of parking. Right now, you can only get so many points. You can only get 200 points per square foot of the value or the size of the lot of the area, and we're basically increasing that to 100. Okay. So that is the most significant change. The rest of these are not as significant. But I can't honestly tell you what the implication is, though, when you start making some of these actual bonus point values much different than they are right now.
Okay, but let me ask you this question. When you, staff, was looking at this and reviewing it for P&Z and meeting with Mr. Potter and other, architects or planners, you came up with a series of points, And did you, I understand you can't tell with great precision what the consequences may or may not be, but why would you have come up with 1 point for 70 square feet and Ms. Selcraig with 15 points for 70 square feet? I mean, what's...
We didn't touch, this is what exists.
This is old. It's the old stuff.
This is, okay, you didn't change this one. I got
No,
you.
we didn't. We didn't.
I understand that from looking at it again.
What we're doing is primarily adding new amenities that are more current today than 35 years ago.
Okay. Well, I guess when it comes down to it, my question is this. 1 versus 15, 1 versus 20 seems significant. Do you think it's significant? Or do you know?
Not anywhere near as significant as some of the other provisions.
right.
All right. That's what I wanted to know. Okay. Anyone else in the queue? I see no one. Mr. Birch or Mr. Teshi, weigh in if you want to. Nope. All right. On the question of the Ms. Selcraig's amendment, which would increase the open-air plaza or landscape in the B2A, 15 points per 70 square feet and 20 points per 80. I'm assuming that's 80 square feet. And in the B2B, the same increases. And in the B2C, since we have a different level, it's 100 square feet and 115 square feet. May I ask Mr. Oh, I see it. It continues on the top of the next page. I got you. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Call the roll. Let's ask for unanimous consent. Is there any concern or objection to this one? Mr. Salt, let's call the roll. We've got people who are not ready to support by unanimous consent. Call the roll, Madam Chair, on the motion, on the amendment.
Okay, Ms. Johnston.
Yes.
Mr. Birch? No. Mr. Bauer?
No.
Ms. Selcraig, Dr. Selcraig?
Yes.
Mr. Klayman?
Yes.
Mr. Teshi?
Yes.
Mr. Trainee? Yes. Mr. Sullivan?
No.
Mr. Starr?
No.
Mr. Coffey?
No.
Ms. Osiander? Mr. Chairman, that passed 6-5.
All right. Anything else, Ms. Selcraig?
Mr. Chair, I would I'd like to move to reconsider.
I understand that.
Oh.
I'd like to get Ms. Selcraig.
No,
Are you done?
thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Klayman.
I want to move to reconsider the vote on the bike rack topic, and the
Is
reason.
there a second?
I just want to explain.
Wait a second.
Oh,
Let's see if you get a second.
oh.
Thank you. You now have a second. Go ahead, Mr. Klayman.
The reason that I'm moving to reconsider is that after the vote, I learned that I was under a misapprehension. I believe that Ms. Selcraig's amendment would have reduced the number of bike racks rather than increased the number of bike racks. And as a person who is very passionate about biking and having places to park bikes, had I known that, I would have voted yes. And so I'm moving to reconsider because I would like to support more bike racks and would, in fact, vote to support the amendment.
Ms. Osiander, are you in the queue for that one? No? Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on the motion to reconsider? Seeing none, is there objection to reconsideration? Seeing no objection, the matter is back before us. Go ahead, Mr. Klayman.
I'll speak in favor of the amendment so that it increases bike parking downtown.
Anyone? Mr. Sullivan.
Yes, we should probably restate just what the amendment was. I believe it was
Fine.
reducing the points for bike racks of all kinds, open, covered,
Right.
et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it does. Everybody understand it?
Yeah.
Mr. Klayman claims there'll be more bike racks. I guess he gets that from Mr. Nelson, who knows more about bike racks than I know. So there we have it.
And just while I still have the floor, I guess my question would be, why does that mean more bike racks, less bike racks, or the same number of bike racks? If you reduce the points, aren't you reducing the incentive to put in bike racks?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
If I may respond. Basically, there's a cap on each of these. It's a small cap. And so if you look at the value per bike rack and reduce the value, you will end up getting more bike racks to get to the cap.
So it just means that they...
Okay. Ms. Selcraig.
No comment, sorry.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to weigh in on bike racks and the motion to reconsider? None. Is there objection to approval of the reduction in the points for bike racks? Yes. We already reconsidered, did we not?
Yes, we did.
We did. I asked for objection, and nobody objected, so we reconsidered. So now we're on the main motion, and now the main motion is deliberation is done. Does anybody is there any objection to the main motion, which reduces the points on bike racks? Ms. Ocean, is there anybody else? There's only one objection. Fine. Let the record so show that passes 10-1. Are there any other amendments? Ms. Osiander.
Excuse me. I would like to amend by adding a bonus point for B2A to add 14 points per space for below-grade parking.
Is there a second? Fails for lack of a second? No, you're trying to second? Go ahead. Go ahead.
It won't work.
Well, has Mr. Clayman got in there?
Oh, he seconded it.
Now it's Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Trainee. I don't know. Here's what we got. We got Ms. Osiander moved, Ms. Johnston seconded. We're going to have how many bonus points for downtown parking in the B2A district?
And my motion was for 14.
14.
If I could speak for that.
As soon as we get everybody on tap, go ahead. Go ahead.
Now, sir? Thank
Yeah.
you. If you look at the bonus points for both 2B and 2C, you'll see that there are bonus points for enclosed parking. 2B has 11 points per space for above or on grade and 13 points for below grade. And 2C has 10 points for above grade and 14 points for below grade.
Mm-hmm.
One of the arguing points for this whole bonus point revision has been that we don't have enough incentive to really develop our downtown core because there's not enough incentive to put economical office space downtown. And partially the allegation is it's because the city hasn't fulfilled its commitment to build the requisite number of parking facilities. So it seems to me that if one of the main arguments for this whole revision is parking, that we need to address parking in a realistic way. The planning department has concerns about adding parking in the downtown core. And as such, my amendment is only to add underground parking. It may be a moot point because, as been stated, it's a very well-developed area already. And to think that there's going to be a significant opportunity to go in there and in a geologically sound fashion or geophysically sound fashion add underground parking, it may not happen. But if one of the main arguments is parking, then we should address it in some fashion.
Ms. Selcraig.
I have a question just in terms of the number you've selected in the 15. What were you thinking in terms of?
Well, one is 13 points for below grade and the other is 14 points for, in 2C it's 14 points and 2B it's 13 points. I frankly don't care if it's 13 or 14.
No, actually, I just needed that. I didn't see that. Thank you.
Here, so, Ms. Oceander, so I understand it. There's no one else in the queue, so I'll ask a question. If someone digs down and builds underground parking in the what's the core of the core,
yes, sir,
they get 14 points by your amendment.
Per space.
If they build 5 floors of parking above ground, they get nothing.
Correct.
What's the rationale for that? I thought we wanted to encourage parking. Why wouldn't you do it either? Why wouldn't you do it the same as you do it in the others? Particularly when you got water table issues down in the downtown core.
Because when we adopted the downtown plan, we talked about making the downtown core a pedestrian oasis in a sense, a pedestrian intensive area. I read that. I voted for that, so I've got to support it. Additionally, I have had now conversations with 3 of the planners who work for our city, and they have real concern about adding parking incentives. So I thought, I'm going to modify it a little bit and just do underground. You could convince me, sir, if you want to amend it to add the above ground too.
I don't. I'm going to come back to Ms. Selcraig and Mr. Clayman, but I'm going to ask my question. What is the reason for your concern about parking incentives and the B2A, the core district, Mr. Nelson.
Mr. Chair, the reason why staff is concerned about encouraging parking in the core area is because of the impact it has on traffic congestion and traffic pedestrian conflicts. The core area is the area where you have the highest concentration of pedestrians, and it's the area where you really want to minimize traffic. When you look at where you want to maximize the efficiency of your parking structures, the concentration of parking areas, it's much preferable to have it in what's called the intermediate or the peripheral area, so that you basically can minimize the impact of the traffic movements in and out of the garage on your high pedestrian areas. Most cities basically discourage having parking structures within those really high pedestrian frequented areas. And that's what we've identified the B2A area to be. It is where we have our greatest concentration of civic facilities, retail facilities, and so forth. I want to emphasize that we recognize the importance and the need for parking, but we have to be selective in where we really want to try to encourage its concentration.
All right, well, let me
follow.
follow.
Area is not where we would suggest encouraging it.
But where are all of our parking garages right now?
Most of them are in the B2B district, not the B2A.
Where's the B2A? Just describe it to me.
Generally speaking, I don't have that, but generally speaking, I believe it's basically from C Street to G Street, 4th Avenue to roughly 6th, 7th Avenue. Half block between.
I can name 4 parking garages in that area right there. But anyway, okay. Well, then what's the difference between above and below? That's my last question.
Basically, if they're below grade, they have less impact on the street level streetscape than having a parking garage at grade.
That's better.
And they also, it affects the urban form. It affects the liveliness of the downtown area. If you have enclosed parking, the best place to have it is underground.
Is enclosed doesn't mean enclosed in the sense of completely. It's open to the air.
Yeah,
right?
Enclosed basically means it's a parking structure.
Okay. All right, thank you, Ms. Selcraig. Then Mr. Klayman, Ms. Selcraig.
I would concur with staff and glad to hear the comment about the importance of having it not at grade, particularly in that core area. That core area should really be, you should have a street front, and so I'm actually, because of the need, I think, for downtown parking, I'm not uncomfortable with it underground. But I definitely think it needs to be underground. I think in this core area, if it was above ground, it would really impact the streetscape.
All right. Mr. Klayman?
Mr. Nelson, I appreciate all the comments, but I'm still a little unclear where your department is in support of this proposed amendment, just as to underground structures are not in support. And maybe it's all kind of moot because the extent it's built up there, the likelihood of a new building in the near future that would have this issue is pretty limited. But where is the department?
Where's the what?
Where is his department in terms of this amendment? Supporting it or against it?
We're not supporting it. It came to our attention a couple of hours ago. And in light of our understanding of the dynamics of the downtown and the importance of basically minimizing pedestrian traffic conflicts, the core area is not an area where we would encourage concentration of parking. But conceding that if you are going to have parking in the core area, certainly underground is much preferable to at grade or above.
Follow-up question to Mr. Klayman. If a guy comes in with a plan and says, I'm going to put 3 underground, he gets his bonus points, I'm going to put 3 above ground, are you going to say no?
Yes.
Or does he have the right to build it even if he doesn't get bonus points?
He has the right to build. He just wouldn't get bonus point credit for it if he wanted to add additional gross square footage to the building.
Well, I think last comment from me, I think we made a big mistake years ago when we said we wouldn't require parking for any buildings and we'd build them all. And now we've got 2 parking garages on G between 6th and 7th. We just building a new one across from the Atwood Center. We've got, keep going down the list, you know it. So we either provide it or we don't. I don't know what the consequences of this decision to add, 14 bonus points for each each level?
No, it's
Each parking space.
just what's already there. per space.
Per space?
That's what it reads on 2A, 2B and C. 14 points.
Yeah, I'm looking.
But they can't go above a certain number of points without a conditional use permit.
14 points, it doesn't say that. It says 14 points per space below grade.
Right.
So in other words, if he builds 50 spaces, he gets, whatever, 90 points,
But-
900 points.
But he needs a conditional use permit to go over a certain number of spaces.
Where's that?
That's code.
Not this code, some other code. Is that right, Mr. Nelson?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
You need a conditional use to go over a certain number of spaces,
That's correct. To go over 50 spaces requires a conditional use.
but not related to bonus points.
That's right.
If you've got
Not
a
related-
conditional use
not-
for 100 spaces, you're going to get 14 times 100 or 10 times 100.
You don't get allowance for any additional square footage of building by putting in parking, enclosed parking in the B2A district.
No. Ms. Osiander said in the B2, let's just use the B2C district, because I happen to be on page 10.
Okay.
It says you get 10 points above ground and per space and 14 points per space below ground. You can build 50 spaces as a matter of right.
49.
Okay, 49.
That's correct.
Right? If you get a conditional use and build 100, do you get 14 underground? Do you get 14 times 100 bonus points?
Yes.
Okay. So the conditional use is not a limiter. It just means you need to get a conditional use to have it.
Right.
Okay.
Question.
So does everybody. Go ahead, Ms. Selcraig.
I just want to ask staff a question. Currently, in the B2 zone, you're allowed to have parking. So we're not talking about whether or not we're going to have parking in these areas. The question is whether or not there's an incentive to put them underground. And it seems to me that they're having an incentive to actually, if you're going to build a building that has parking, having an incentive in our bonuses to allow or to encourage people to put their parking underground is worthwhile. Does that make sense to you, Mr. Nelson, at all? I mean, basically what this would serve as is in those areas, there's not a restriction of parking in B1. You can put parking in B1 right now, right?
In the B2A.
B2A, you're allowed to do that, right?
You're allowed to do that, but you're not allowed to get bonus points for additional height of a building.
Okay.
Because the point being is we're not trying to encourage.
But if a developer wants to have parking with their building, if we give them bonus points, if bonus points are available to put it underground, I think that the actual form of the building would be more compatible, wouldn't it? In other words, what we create is, my hunch is that we're going to have buildings built that want to have parking with them. And by approving this, what we'd be doing is encouraging that parking to be underground so that they would get a benefit of points if they put their parking underground. I mean, that's one way of looking at it.
That is one way of looking at it, and that's why I was reluctant to take a definitive position this evening.
Well, actually, that's how I would look at this, is that I think that by doing this, what we would be doing is we would be people who are going to be building buildings, developers who are going to be building buildings and plan to have parking will get an incentive to actually put that parking underground, which is more compatible with that district. So I think it's a worthwhile change, and I'm going to be supporting it. Thank you.
The only reason I brought up the other parking
good
garage,
point.
Ms. Selcraig, is because we sort of have already committed in that district to large amounts of parking. And so compatibility kind of goes away. I mean, you can handle above-ground parking by retail on the first floor like they're doing in the one across from the Atwood Center. But
I just
be that
wanna
as it may,
share-
we have a motion in front of us.
I'd like to share with you, my mother said that Anchorage has no problems that 100 years won't fix. Right?
And you and I will be here. There we go. All right. On the 14 bonus points per space for underground parking in the B2A district, is there objection to that amendment? Because we'll do a roll call if there's anybody objecting. Well, I object, so how's that?
Okay.
All right. Well, I do. I
Mr.
don't think
Chair?
it makes sense. Mr. Nelson?
I would like to clarify that there, to my knowledge, there's only one parking garage in the B2A district today, which is the J.C. Penney garage. The others are all in the B2B district. including the new one.
On 6th Avenue, between 6th and 7th?
It's on the south half of the block,
I know where it is.
which I believe puts it in the B2B district.
You know that, or you're guessing?
I can't say definitively.
Okay, then let's just go on and without it. It's downtown and pretty much in the core. Be that as it may. Okay, let's vote, please. Oh, hold it. Now people want to talk again? Mr. Birch?
I was just going to mention when the museum was under design, I remember having a discussion with the design team about the potential for underground parking there. And I think the discussion was it was prohibitively expensive, and it actually was because I just thought it was real convenient as well. But I am troubled by some of the changes that we're making at this late hour, particularly when Mr. Nelson says he hasn't thoroughly reviewed it. And I think we're going to be reviewing this down the road anyway, and I'm going to be voting against this, and would encourage us to kind of do this when we have the amount of time that we can really dedicate to it and have the planning and zoning folks look at it as well. Thank you.
Ms. Osiander.
Planning and zoning has already looked at it. They talked a whole lot about wind tunnels and sky bridges and heated sidewalks, and I read all their comments. All this does is add an incentive to put in some parking underground. That's my intent. The reason I asked to postpone is I wanted to see a map of the R2A. And since we don't get that opportunity, this is the only chance to address it. Yes, we will do it again, but I promise you it'll be at least 2 years.
Ms. Osiander pointed out to me, after offering me a few more nuts, was that if I wanted to encourage parking in this district, I would want them to at least get something for parking, be it underground or above ground.
Underground's better.
I believe that we are a cold winter city, and I love all this stuff we try to do to encourage pedestrians and stuff. I am skeptical that they will work, and I believe people will like to be able to drive as close to their work or their shopping as they possibly can when there's 5 hours of daylight in January and December. And therefore, if we make it possible for them to park close, we're probably better off rather than worse off. And if it adds an extra floor to the building, so be it. What worries me is sort of this ad hoc notion that we are improving things by doing this. But bowing to the certainly proven greater wisdom of Ms. Osiander.
Oh, remember that was...
You do. Write it down. You'll never hear it again. I'll go along with this and find out if we get 14 floors of underground parking in the next few weeks. Thank you. I'm done. Anybody else? No? Okay. Shall I try one more time? Is everybody okay with this amendment? No? Anybody else? One objection. Note it. It's passed.
Okay, so
Anything else, folks, on this? We're now we're on the main motion as amended. Any further discussion? Please queue in. No one in the queue. Please vote. Oh, you got to call the roll. Let me ask this. Unanimous consent to 2008-35S, the bonus point system, the amenity points as they call it now. Bonus is apparently a word that's fallen out of favor. Amenity points. Does anybody object to the adoption of the amended ordinance? Anyone at all? Seeing none and hearing no objection, that matter is approved.
there we go.
Done. Next is item 2008-38, an ordinance authorizing a non-exclusive utility easement to ACS cable systems across HLB parcels 4-033A, 033B, and 03334 for installation of fiber optic cable and related facilities. Anyone wishing to testify on this matter, please come forward. This is an easement, utility easement. And here they come. Good evening.
Good evening.
Please state your name and tell us what you have to say.
Great. We'll be swift. Mr. Chairman and members of the Assembly, my name is Mary Gasperlin. I'm the Director of Corporate Communications for Alaska Communication Systems. I have with me here Dale Patrick, who is our Director of Field Operations, and Sherry Greenshields, who is our permitting consultant. I will give just a short overview of our fiber project, then turn the mic over to Dale to talk about the specifics of our easement request. ACS is building a $100 million fiber optic cable system that will link Alaska to the lower 48. This is an investment that's unparalleled by a company of our size. The fiber system offers a unique route, which is diverse from the other 3 routes that connects Alaska to lower 48, which I'm sure you've all seen in the news lately, a couple of major systems that have been cut or severed or damaged by the elements. And it will also offer a unique landing, which would be further south of the other landings. It will contribute greatly to the future of communications to and from Alaska for major broadband users that need a huge capacity, cutting-edge technology, and it offers a 25-year lifespan, which is, of course, a lot longer than what's available now with existing cables that have been in place for years. So we're asking your approval tonight for this easement because 2 things. We believe it maximizes the use of existing easements, as well as provides a minimal footprint of any impact to the environment. With that, I'll turn it over to Dale. Thank you.
Hang on.
Please, I was just going to have him give
Oh, no,
more
that's
detail.
fine. I'm sorry. I misunderstood. Please continue.
Good evening. I'm Dale Patrick. We'll be landing the fiber cable just west of the Clethro Center onto Heritage Land Bank property, and from there we'll be going southerly along an existing Tesoro pipeline easement, and then we'll enter airport property and run down along the airport property into basically Raspberry and Sand Lake and pick up an existing fiber. So it's going to be minimal impact. We're boring out to the mud flats, boring underneath that, about a 1,200-foot bore, be 30 to 40 foot deep, and basically very, very low impact on the whole route.
Thank you. No, that's it? Okay, I have Ms. Osander in the queue. Go ahead, Ms. Osander.
Does this preclude any kind of development in the easement?
No, it does not. It's a non-exclusive easement request.
So potentially the airport, this is adjacent to the airport, correct?
Yes, it is. And
Could
we've
go
worked with
ahead and build a facility or use that somehow?
We have worked with Airport and got this out of their construction zone. So if they extend that airport,
No,
we
I know
will.
it's our property, but it's adjacent
Yeah.
to the airport.
Right. We have worked with them, and they're going to extend that runway somewhat, but we're well past that. We will be out of their zone of construction.
And there's no limitation then for 50 years from now, if HLB wants to do something with that property, there's no limitation on any kind of structure being placed in the easement?
I do not believe there is.
Okay, thank you, sir.
That's all I have in the queue. I'll ask a question. This will run through and adjacent to it, from I can tell from the map, near the coastal trail and stuff?
Yes.
As it goes around the airport?
Yes.
What's the consequence or the effect for that amenity?
None. We will actually be coming back from the coastal trail towards the Clethro Center and actually going underneath it. We'll probably be 30 foot below it. We'll have no impact at all on it.
Okay.
No tree.
And is yours an access tunnel or just a small enough tunnel to feed the cable through?
Actually, what we'll be doing is we would be plying a 1 1/4 inch conduit. And it won't be a trench. It'll be a plow, so it'll just be covered up immediately, and then we'll blow the fiber through that.
All right. Thank you. I have no other questions. Anyone else in the queue? Any other questions? Ms. Selcraig, and then Mr. Klayman. Go ahead, Ms. Selcraig.
I'm just interested in the timing. It's just such a big project. I'm just wondering, when will it begin, and when do you imagine it to be completed?
Well, we want to start construction immediately, of course, because we've got certain time frame where we want to not to disturb any nesting or any type of environmental.
Speak into the mic so we
Sorry.
get the record. That's okay.
Okay.
We do it all the time.
So we've got a very tight timeline with this project, and we've worked very closely with the Corps to make sure that we've adhered to any type of environmental concerns. So we want to make sure that we can start construction immediately to also alleviate any time frame for high season use for the coastal trail or any different recreation areas.
So you'll be starting immediately, and you anticipate completing the project?
Please.
Let me speak to that. Fish and Game, in this coastal refuge here, there's migration concerns, and we have recently come to an agreement with them. We will not start construction for this bore until after May 15th.
Okay.
Please give us your name, just for the record.
Sherry Greenschultz.
Thank you.
And then the total project will be completed
By the end of December. So the construction project, it's an 1,800-mile project. It will complete by the end of December, beginning of January of 2009, and will light up sometime in the first quarter.
Thank you.
Mr. Klayman.
I just got a little confused by the construction description. I thought that what's coming from the coast in and is actually a bore that goes under the coastal trail, so you're not actually having to dig a trench and then pull up trail. Is there going to be a short interruption, or is it going underground?
No, it's going underground all the way, so there'll be absolutely no impact on the trail.
Okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Klayman. There's no one else in the queue. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to testify on this easement for cable? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Ms. Selcraig?
Second.
Mr. Klayman? Ms. Osiander?
Oh, Mr. Chairman, as the maker of the motion, can I?
Wait.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. You're in there. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Mr. Sullivan.
just a quick comment. This, of course, goes through Mr. Klayman and my district. Both the Turning Community Council and the Sand Lake Community Council have had an opportunity to have this presentation, and there were no significant concerns that were not adequately answered by the folks at ACS, and so I urge approval.
Thank you. Ms. Osiander?
I just had a quick question. What kind of revenue are we anticipating? Ms. Osiander.
Mike, please.
No, you're on. Ms. Osiander, through the chair. We are currently having an appraisal done for the easement use fee. It's going to be available April 1st. We're anticipating probably a minimum of a $10,000 fee.
Sorry?
$10,000 fee.
Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan, you back in or no? Okay.
No, thank you, sir.
Thank you. No one else in the queue, please vote. Or please, let me see, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting that. Any objection to the passage of this easement, non-exclusive easement? Anyone at all? Madam Clerk, reflect unanimous consent to that item. We're now in front of us is hang on. Back up. I got to close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed. Now, I need a motion.
Move to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Ms. Selcraig, second. Any discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the passage of this? Now, let the record reflect we have unanimous consent. Thank you. Now, I am now on, well, Madam Clerk, we're on 2008-29. It's an appropriation resolution for the CIP Fund for Anchorage Roads and Drainage Service Area, for Anchorage Parks, and for public transportation on the bonds. Thank you. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anyone wishing to testify on item 14D, please come forward. Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
I've got Sullivan and Klayman in there. Fine. Discussion, Mr. Sullivan?
Urge passage.
Mr. Klayman, anything to add? No one else in the queue. Is there any objection to the passage of this appropriation resolution? Any objection at all? Madam Clerk, reflect unanimous consent to 14D. Item 14E is a resolution of the Anchorage Municipality of Anchorage accepting and appropriating $296,754 as a federal pass-through. Reference the Southeast Sustainable. Thank you. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anyone wishing to testify on this grant from the federal government, please come down. Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the body on item 14E? I've got a motion from Mr. Klayman. Is there a second? Ms. Johnston? Okay. You need to both speak and touch. Thank you very much. Is there discussion? There is no discussion. Is there objection to the passage of this item? Anyone at all objecting? Seeing and hearing no objection, that item is passed by unanimous consent. Item 14F. It's another appropriations resolution in the amount of $113,440.
Waive reading.
Thank you. Public hearing on this appropriation for the administration of the Anti-Gang Initiative Program is now open. Anyone wishing to testify, please come down. Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Thank you. Is there discussion?
No, Mr. Chairman, for the record, I am awake and I urge approval.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Is there any objection to the passage of this item, item 14F? Seeing and hearing no objections, that item is approved. We now are at an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly to provisionally adopt new chapters 2104, 2105, and 2106.
Waive reading.
Thank you. This is the Title 21.
Mr. Chairman, there are people who've waited all night who just stepped out on this. I'm going to go.
Well, there's going to be a time. Okay. The guard can get them. Ms. Selkirk? Okay. The public hearing on this item is open and will be undoubtedly continued, as we have said many times. Public hearing on Title 21, Chapters 4, 5, and 6 is now open. Anyone wishing to be heard, please come down. Anyone at all? That's okay. We see you coming. 5, 4, 3, 2, no. No, I understand. We're moving. When we appropriate money, we can move real quick. Come on down.
Okay, it is Title 21.
Yes, ma'am, it is. Nice to see you. Please give us your name.
My name is Chris Mann.
Good evening.
And good evening. Thanks for alerting me to the fact that you are on Title 21. I wanted to mention that we appreciate the changes that were made with respect to Chapters 4, 5, and 6 by the Planning and Zoning Commission with respect to antenna farms, AF zoning. But there are a couple of changes that we would like to see made in addition. And I'll address one, and Rick Kohlberg will address the other. The one that I will address has to do, if you take a look at the public draft, it's in Table 2 on page 11. And it has to do with parks and open area. As it stands right now, you are allowed, these are the permissible uses in the non-residential districts. You are allowed to have park and open space, public or private, in an AF district. We were quite extensively involved in a rezoning issue that involved putting an antenna farm up on Near Point a number of years ago, about 3 or 4, 5 years ago now, probably about 4. And one of our members of Friends of Near Point is a physicist and did a study to show that there would be radiation danger from the antennas, the towers with antennas on them, to people who would be hiking in the adjacent park, Chugach State Park. I think it's very, very unwise to situate a park, public or private, in an AF zone. And I would encourage you to delete that altogether, to delete the S that's there under AF. But if you feel that it should be permissible, then at least to change that S to M for major site review. Thank you.
So far, when we've talked in committee about antenna farms, we've tried to get an understanding of the impact of that, and the feedback we got back is that antenna farm districts are very limited, and that section, if I recall correctly, would, we thought, just allow the antenna farm to have some open space or some screening or landscaping within the antenna farm district. It wasn't to have a park inside of the antenna.
Well,
did I misunderstand what you were saying?
I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
But then I would have a separate category, which would just be open space and would not include park in it. This,
Okay.
as it's worded, says park and open space, public or private.
Okay.
I would break that into two, where you would say park, public or private, that, in my opinion, shouldn't be allowed at all.
Okay.
And then open space, not public, just private, because it would be part of the AF district. So I would think that would be private. You don't want public open space. You don't want people to be allowed to go into that area, the public.
Okay, thank you. I understand
Yeah.
your point.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to testify tonight, please come down. Remember, folks, we're going to be at this for several Tuesdays. Anyone at all?
Sorry, who's coming?
Good evening.
Rick Kohlberg, and I'm also a member of the Friends of Nearpoint that dealt with the antenna farm issue a number of years ago. I commend the changes that were made in the definition of the antenna farm district, taking into account the impacts on view and aesthetics in park areas in the community. I just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that in Table 21.05.2, that under telecommunication facilities, that you do permit type 1, 2, and 3 towers in parks. And it seems to me that such towers should be prohibited from parks because of obvious danger aspects, not just from radiation, but attractive nuisance dangers. And I would encourage eliminating altogether the placement of telecommunications towers in parks. If not eliminating it altogether, at least change the S to an M to a major site review.
Thank you. I have no men in the queue for questions. Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing? Do you want to have a question?
Yes, I do, sir.
Well, then push the button.
Yeah.
There you go. Go ahead, Ms. Osiander.
Okay, now, you hit something I don't remember at all. You're saying that in the description of parks, we're allowing types 1, 2, and 3 antennas?
Yeah, PR stands for park in this table, doesn't it?
All right, I'll look at that again.
Yeah, and under telecommunication facilities, type 1, 2, and 3 towers, and those can be significant structures.
No, absolutely.
And well, kids play on them, and they generate a lot of radiation.
I'll look at that again, sir.
And they can be placed with administrative site review in parks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hall, Ms. Selcraig.
I just want to comment. I appreciate you taking the time to come down and do this. We're looking forward to more comments, but these are refined comments, and it's appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. I just clarity, Mr. Nelson. Does PR in the chapter, I forget what, 4, 5, or 6, does PR stand for parks or private public reserve?
It's be parks.
It is parks. Okay, thank you. Ms. Selcraig?
No.
Okay. Anyone else wishing to testify tonight? Title 21. We're going to continue the public hearing. Anyone at all? Go ahead, Ms. Osiander. 25th.
The 25th.
Second.
And that's the motion to continue the public hearing till March 25th. We'll take them up again. We'll also, as we said, probably come back with 3 of the same ordinances, same language in 3 different ordinances, so we can get our arms around them a little easier. So that means something could be introduced on the 25th that would change just the process, not the substance. Thank you. Is there objection to continuing the public hearing till March 25th on the Title 21 ordinance? Any objection? Seeing none, let the record reflect unanimous consent to that continuance. We now have, I'm sorry, Ms. Osiander.
Oh, Mr. Sullivan wanted to speak, I think.
No, I just I punched in under second motion, but you hadn't punched in under first motion, so I.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Sullivan, go ahead.
Nothing, just making the system work, sir.
Oh, thank you.
There was human error to the left of you.
Human error to the right of us.
Surrounding us.
All around us is human error. My Lord, I can't imagine this body ever making a mistake. Okay, we're on the last one. 2008-16, an ordinance of amending Anchorage Municipal Code sections 5.
Waive reading.
Thank you. This relates to the Equal Rights Commission and a hearing officer and homeowners associations. Anyone wishing to testify on this item, please come forward. Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to.
I've got I've got movers and shakers in here. I've got Ms. Osiander as the mover and Mr. Sullivan as the second.
Which is from the last item.
Okay, then let's
But that's
go.
as good as, that's good on this one,
It's
too.
good, it's here. Okay. It's really not, nobody pays any attention to who moves in seconds. So just get it in front of us. All right. Somebody at the far end wants to talk about this, Mr. Clayman or Ms. Selcraig? Nope. Anybody want to say anything about it? Ms. Osiander.
Urge approval. We heard from the Equal Rights Commission. They talked about why this was necessary during budget time. I asked some questions about economic impact. My understanding is this is going to speed the process and there'll be no additional cost. So urge support.
I sometimes wonder why we have the feds, the state, and us doing the same thing.
Well, there is that.
That's another question for another time. So, is there any objection to the passage of this amendment, of this ordinance, rather? Any objection at all? Seeing none, let the record reflect that we have passed that unanimously. Madam Clerk, that shows me as having completed all the agenda items. We are now at special orders. There are none. Audience participation. Anybody wishing to address the body for 3 minutes may come down now. Anyone at all? Okay, nobody wants to come down. Any assembly comments up and down the line? Anybody have anything to add? None.
Move to adjourn.
Well, you didn't let me ask about executive sessions. Okay, no executive sessions. There's a motion to adjourn. We are adjourned.
Thanks, folks. See you tomorrow.
Good night. Goodbye.